This
meeting to
conference
order.
will now be recorded.
So we've got District Attorney Pierce online, Supervisor Tinkle, Supervisor Banks, Supervisor Feinberg, Supervisor Guy, Supervisor Flaherty. District Manager Chris Shoemaker. Is Frank in the room?
No, Leslie's here, Kenny's here, and Brian's here.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will ask that we start the meeting with the Pledge of the Allegiance like we always do. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just as for just a little reminder on protocol, if anybody does have phones, they should shut them to silent. And to help record conversations, questions, comments, I'm going to ask that Mr. Shoemaker run the meeting asking for each person down the line if they have any comments. And I think it worked really well the first meeting when we started with Mrs. Flaherty, and then Mr. Guy, Mr. Banks, Mr. Tinkle, and then myself. And the same thing with votes. I'll ask him to call that same roll in that order for voting. And with that, I guess, Mr. Shoemaker, is there anyone besides Mr. Senior that wanted to speak on an agenda item or non-agenda item?
No, we only have Mr. Senior that requested to speak on the agenda item related to the Griffin Roundabout.
Okay.
And our statement for the public too is any person may be heard by the board through the chair upon registering to speak, but not more than 5 minutes or on any agenda item. And since this is a virtual meeting, it may be done telephonically or through the GoToMeeting with the access code that's on the website and also on the agenda today. And all comments submitted will be included as part of the public record for this virtual meeting and will be considered by the board prior to any action taken. And if there's any speaker that needs an accommodation, we would be glad to work with them. So the first item on the agenda is audience and public comment and regarding agenda items. And with that, I'll ask Mr. Senior, you want to unmute him for his comment. Mr. Senior, can you hear me?
He has to unmute himself.
No,
Yeah, my screen says he's got his mute on.
Yeah.
I'm not able to unmute him.
Yeah, he's muted on his end. Maybe he's waiting for the agenda item.
I've sent him an unmute request.
Yeah, we sent an unmute request. Let's just do it.
Yeah, he just put in a chat that says, "Can you unmute me?" So
yeah, we've got it. We sent it to him.
He's unmuted. He muted himself again. There he is.
Mr. Senior, are you there? We have you on the agenda to speak.
Can anyone hear me now?
Yes,
Now I can
sir.
hear you.
A little bit, we've got you.
Okay, I apologize, guys.
It's okay.
Just- okay, Margaret, can you hear me okay?
I can just fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll dive in. Nice to see you all. You don't need to see me, of course. You know what I look like. Item 2B, $123,000 is for to design utilities relocation is, in my opinion, absurd. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and I would imagine that by the time we finish relocating these utilities because of this roundabout, it could cost us $1 million. And, you know, with the economy the way it is, and with the competing projects that you guys are wrestling with, you know, soccer fields, the lakes, the littorals, I mean, do we really need to charge ahead with this? Doug, I just want to mention to you, and thank you for bringing up my chat request at the end of the last meeting. You mentioned that the horse had already left the barn on the roundabout at Commerce Lakes. Yes, it has, but it hasn't left the barn on Griffin yet. I've spoken to Commissioner Pendergrass a number of times, only recently on this, and it most certainly hasn't yet been decided. And we have the opportunity to still have a go at the county on this one, having local knowledge and us being the ones who are going to have to foot the bill for relocating these utilities. I think it's an outrageous amount of money, frankly. As far as the roundabout is concerned, you know, coming from England, I know a lot about roundabouts. We are the world leaders in roundabouts, and you know, there is nowhere for pedestrians or school kids to cross. There's nowhere for mothers with strollers to cross, cyclists or golf carts. And similarly, if you look at a stoplight, there is a discipline which allows that all those things to occur in a much better fashion. And it certainly wouldn't drag with it $1 million of utilities relocations for a simple stoplight. The additional consideration is the 200 apartments at Griffin and Gateway Boulevard, and the only way they're going to get out of that piece of land is either on Devonshire, on that little section by the bank, or onto a northbound Gateway Boulevard. And with a roundabout, there's going to be relentless traffic going north, and they won't be able to get out at peak hours. And therefore, they're going to have to come out on the Devonshire end. And therefore, the Waterford residents and Devonshire residents are going to be landlocked, and they're going to be severely inconvenienced because there's going to be no other way out for those 200 tenants. With a stoplight, that will change because of the discipline. I think that based upon my discussions with Commissioner Pendergrass, he could be persuaded, in my opinion, that we have a case for putting a stoplight there. I realize that 3 supervisors are from Stony Brook and you don't have a local dog in the fight, so to speak, but I'm appealing to you because you represent all of Gateway. And what I'd like to suggest here is that myself and Mr. Tinkle write a letter, because we've had a lot of practice at writing letters together on the HOA and we work well together, for your board's consideration. And if it represents the feeling of the entire board, for Margaret to sign it, a formal letter to the Lee County Board of County Commissioners, and Ed and I will do the work, sign the letter, appealing for them to reconsider this whole roundabout situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rod.
I didn't write that for him, but I feel the same way.
Chris, why don't you just, on this particular item, since it is, I know this is a hot button issue for the entire community, just go down the line, starting with Mrs. Flaherty, and ask for any comments.
Sure. Supervisor Flaherty, comments?
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I also agree. I have asked before. I said the yeah, the Griffin and Gateway roundabout was not done deal. You had told me that. And I don't think we need it either. And I'm not for it.
Okay, Mr. Guy?
I believe that I made myself clear when this thing was first proposed, when the Lee County engineer came to our meeting. I questioned him, and they indicated that they were willing to give up some serious T-bone accidents in favor of having a bunch of fender benders, indicating that the less serious fender benders were more acceptable, even though it'll take 2 hours for the police authorities to clear the road. I think it's a bad idea, and I was and am and will be opposed.
Mr. Banks?
He's not muted.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're all in agreement that a roundabout, when the DOT was on site, in my opinion, there wasn't an overwhelming benefit to the roundabout versus the traffic light. There was some efficiencies maybe over time or during peak traffic times, but it wasn't overwhelming. So I'm like everyone else. Look, if we can influence and get a traffic light, it serves the purpose and it's cheaper. I mean, no one wants to spend more money on this stuff. So I think we're all in agreement.
Mr. Tinkle?
Yeah, I'd like to get Danny on the line to put this in an order of magnitude. Danny, are you on?
Yeah, I'm on.
Who are you looking for?
Danny Nelson. Here's my question. Danny, what did we pay or what are we going to pay for utility relocation at Commerce to give us an idea of the order of magnitude of the cost at Griffin?
Oh, I think it was estimated under around $500,000 to replace the utilities there. That bid was supposed to have been a couple of weeks ago, and it was pushed back to June, so we don't know what the actual number is.
Okay, so we do know that we have far more conflicts and utilities crossing and all coming together at Griffin as opposed to Commerce Lake. So it's going to be that number or higher for sure. Question for you. Rod posed this to me earlier, and my background's not traffic engineering, but the county made it clear, and Bill was very upset about it when we had the talk at at Commerce, about the need to replace all these utilities. Well, the understanding was there then was that we were doing construction, doing excavation. If we would go to like what Rod is saying, and we would go to do a stoplight only, would there be a need to tear out all the utilities that are in that intersection, which probably 3 or 4 acres worth, if it's just putting in a street light?
Most likely not. It'd depend on what type, if we're going to use a mast arms or concrete poles, and where the concrete poles might be set or where the mast arm might be set, but most likely not. And let me say on this too, if the pipes are ductile iron, the counties stated they'll allow utilities to stay. The challenge with this intersection and the roundabout where it is you do have ductile iron pipes. Your water main and your irrigation and possibly even your wastewater are ductile. The problem is that you've got a major intersection, not only of the roadway, but of the utilities on the northeast corner, which you now would end up having valving not only under the edge of pavement within the roundabout, but also on the within the curbing of it. So there's no way that they would let it stay. I say no way. I don't see that happening. I would love for nothing to be done. And Rod, trust me when I say I really don't want this $123,000 of work. I think the whole thing is dumb. But if you're going to be forced to do it and the roundabout moves forward, unfortunately, you've got to deal with that as you understand. But That's the problem is you've got to cross 4 lines. So basically of water runs northeast, south, and west, and irrigation northeast, south, and west with 4 valves on each. And those are major lines, I think 20 and 16 inch. So you've got some major lines, some major utilities. So yeah, it's going to take a lot to do that and move it. And then the question is, where does it move? Because, that roundabout takes up, as we know, a lot of space. So you're now pushing the edge and limits of the right of way. So it's a lot of work if you've got to do it.
Well, keep in mind that when we had that sewage force main break apart there at the entrance to Gateway Greens, one of the things that we tried to do was to isolate it by turning the valves off at that intersection, and none of them worked.
Yeah, that's the other challenge. As we know.
Well, my whole thing is on this is that certainly it would be a benefit to the community not to have to spend upwards of maybe $1 million in utility relocation if we simply went to a stoplight. I would like to see them to do some type of a cost benefit analysis that looks at this over a long-term period of time using our dollars and their dollars of comparing a roundabout versus stoplight. I don't think they ever did it.
And it was right at $600,000. Just by the way, is what the estimate was for utilities at Commerce. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we know this one's going to be more. It's a lot more extensive.
Madam Chairman, may I make a suggestion?
May I make my comment first?
Certainly.
I absolutely am in favor of Mr. Tinkle and Mr. Senior coming up with some sort of a letter that we can send to the county commissioners requesting that they revisit this and reconsider putting in a roundabout and putting in a street light. I think that would be the most beneficial thing if we can get their attention for the entire community. That's my statement. Now, Mr. Guy, go right ahead.
I wanted to make a suggestion that this letter, once composed, be sent to the news press. They will print just about anything of this type, and the political leaders always read those letters to the editor.
Bill, may I speak?
Sure.
Margaret, is that okay? I just want to chip in.
Yes, Mr. Senior, go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill, for that. Reminds me of the Royal Palms. And but really, Pendergrass is sensitive to chopping down live oaks. He's told me that. This is going to be one of the negatives of putting a light in there, and Ed knows about this stuff. You've got to chop out some live oaks to see the light. It's a question of how many. And you remember when we were initially turning the roads over, WCI were threatening to tear down a whole load of live oaks on Gateway Boulevard, and David Loveland came out with a rescue plan under the name of the Complete Streets policy that saved the live oaks, because the ladies club and other people in Gateway were up in arms that we were going to lose some trees. Now, Commissioner Pendergrass is sensitive to that for political reasons, so we have to satisfy him that we believe safety comes before trees. And I think that something in the news press will be very useful, Bill. I agree with you.
I think we have to be careful with the tree. I mean, I agree with what you're stating, Ron, but we have determined that we have some potential issues with some oaks impeding sidewalks and streets today. So we might have to, in the future, be in a position where we may have to remove some oaks. So it could be a play that we make there. I would advise the board we have to be sensitive with that justification, because who knows, we may have to pull some out due to critical infrastructure needs.
Yep.
May I add something, please, Madam Chairman?
Go right ahead.
Maybe we should contact the fire department too, because the fire department is supposed to be building a firehouse at that corner. Let's see what they might want to say to this. Good thought.
Tony, go ahead.
Yes, yeah, thank you. Just briefly, sort of a tangential item, but yet it might be a helpful item, is the deed to the Commerce Lakes Drive segment has not yet been signed. We're still finalizing the language. And so the county has a particular, I guess, schedule. I'm not sure what their schedule is when they want that deed. Otherwise, they can't do that roundabout at Commerce Lakes and Gateway Boulevard. And just didn't know if the board wanted me to continue to proceed normal pace routinely to get that finalized and executed by the chair, or just hold back a touch on that.
My opinion is a lot of water has gone over the dam on Commerce Lakes Drive. I don't know if I'd want to make them mad over that to just be in our way on a good discussion of Griffin Drive.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. We'd like to turn that segment of road over to.
Okay, just wanted to put that out there, and I'll just proceed and try to wrap that up quickly.
And Madam Chair,
So just ask for formality. Do we need to make a motion to have a draft letter created by Mr. Tinkle and Mr. Senior?
Yes, I think that'd be very appropriate, and perhaps even at the next board meeting, based upon that letter, you may want to have a board resolution to go to the county commission also.
I'll make that motion. I think it's an excellent idea.
Second.
we have a motion, we have a second for sending a resolution and a letter to Lee County in protest of the roundabout. And I'll take the vote, starting with Ms. Flaherty,
Yes.
Mr. Guy,
Yes.
Mr. Banks.
Yes.
Mr. Tinkle,
Yes.
Ms. Feinberg.
Yes.
Okay, it's a unanimous vote, 5-0. And we will get that letter drafted and bring it back to the board at the next meeting for consideration and approval. We also had a request from the public that asked about discussing the opening of the Gateway Pool during this meeting. And we responded, it's not on the agenda, but they could make a comment. And that's Melissa Geisler. Melissa, are you on the line?
She's unmuted.
She's unmuted.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Listen, it's not on the agenda to discuss that. We've been following the lead of Lee County as far as opening up the sports pool, the sports fields and the pool. But we are open for public comment, so you have 5 minutes, so please help yourself.
Well, if it's not on the agenda, assuming that you're waiting until all of the other public pools open, then is my guess.
Yes, we're following the lead of Lee County, and when they open up their sports fields and their pools, then we will plan on opening ours at the same time.
Okay.
We did the same thing with the dog park. The day they announced they were going to open the dog park, we opened it up like they did the next morning.
Okay, because I saw that the county attorney had posted something on Nextdoor where they said they released the restriction for private and HOA pools. So I didn't know if that had changed your decision on opening the Gateway Community Pool, since we were not considered a public pool.
Well, we're regulated by the Lee County Health Department, and when you have as many connections as households that use the pool as ours, we are, for regulatory purposes, considered a public pool, not a private pool. So that's the reason we follow the Lee County guidelines. The community pools are a little different, especially the ones in the gated communities.
Yeah, our gated community is following your lead. That's why I was asking.
That's the procedure we'll be following. Is there anything else you'd like to say or comment on?
No, sir, that was it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we don't have any other requests for public comment to speak. So we could move to the reports and informational items, district defined industry, registered voters.
Yeah, and this is a routine item. The supervisor of elections each year provides, as required by statute, a correspondence indicating the number of registered voters in the district, and it's just for filing in the records of the district. And so that's a substantial number, almost 11,000 registered voters. And no further action needs to be taken.
Okay, the next item is the notice of qualifying period for the TSCDD Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, the notice is for informational purposes. This will be placed in the newspaper. Excuse me, the statute requires that the notice be in the newspaper at least 2 weeks prior to the beginning of the qualifying period. That's why we have the run date of May 18th, 2020. And it references the 3 seats up for election, seats 1, 2, and 3. They're nonpartisan. The qualifying period is from noon, June 8th to and expires noon, Friday, June 12th. And behind that is resolution number 2020-8, which is a resolution that, again, reiterates the statutory requirements and also addresses the publication of the notice in the newspaper, and the resolution is an appropriate form for adoption by the board.
We have a resolution that's up for consideration. Any questions, comments from supervisors? Supervisor Flaherty?
Agenda page 12, I believe there's a typo. It should be 2020, not 2018. June 8th.
Yeah, that's interesting. That may be from the supervisor of elections office. I don't think that's not something I prepared, or I don't think the district prepared, but good catch.
Okay, just, thank you.
Okay, for comments, Mr. Guy?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the resolution. We'll take the vote. Ms. Flaherty?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Guy?
Yes.
Mr. Banks?
Yes.
Mr. Tinkle?
Yes.
Ms. Feinberg?
Yes.
Motion's approved 5-0 to approve the resolution. Next on the agenda, we have a district engineer task order for engineering services for Gateway and Griffin Roundabout. Danny?
So this is the roundabout. Not sure what you guys want to do with that. If you want to just simply defer it until we see what progress you make with the other approach, or if you want to consider this. But essentially, this would be the design, permitting, bidding, construction, and inspection services associated with that.
Danny, has the county been in contact with you to do this work?
Has who been?
The county?
No, but we're trying to be proactive, recognizing that you got utilities in the way. So what we have done is they've sent us their design plans to review for utilities, and we've sent them back comments associated with with their design as it relates to utilities. That's all we've done.
Danny, what are they telling you is the timeline? They want to have your bidding documents ready to go?
We haven't discussed any of the timelines. I can tell you when we started on Commerce. Sorry, there's a bad echo. I don't know where it's coming from, but when we started on Commerce, it was at the 90%. So we're at the 60% now, and they had requested comments back by the 4th of May. And that was just on their.
I would suggest that we hold off until we present the letter to the supervisors on the 21st, and then see how that flies with the county.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Guy.
I'd like to offer a motion to table this item.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or comments from the board members? We may get involved with some of this as the effort moves on, because whether it's a stoplight or a roundabout, there will be valves in some facilities that may need to be located. So we'll leave this on the table, but we may bring it back sooner than later to address some of those items. So we have a motion and a second. Call for the vote. Supervisor Flaherty,
Yes.
Mr. Guy, Mr. Guy, I was just asking for your vote.
Hey, Bill, can you hear Chris?
What's going on?
He's looking to call the vote to table this item.
Did you not hear my vote?
No, we didn't.
Yeah, I
I
missed
said
it.
yes.
Yes.
Mr. Banks?
Yes.
Mr. Tinkle?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Feinberg?
Yes.
The motion
Where are
is-
we getting this echo from?
I know we're trying to mute different microphones to see where.
Only board members go caller two, probably Danny.
Danny, it seems to be coming from your phone.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we had caller two, that's where it was coming from. But we had a motion to approve tabling this task order to a future date. That motion was approved. Now we'll have item 2, district engineer, task order for Pelican Preserve roadway improvements. You want to unmute Danny and see if it is his phone that's echoing. Danny, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. I could hear you before. I don't know why mine would have been echoing because I've only got the phone on, but who knows? Anyhow, nonetheless, it doesn't seem like there's an echo. So Chris came to us following Pelican Preserve Advisory Board coming to him with some roadway improvements, rumble strips along Veneto towards the clubhouse area, or sorry, to the town center area. Speed limit signs to display the existing speed limit sign towards Viadana, relocation of golf cart crossing on Cypress Grove, and realignment of the multi-use crossing at the entrance of Pelican Preserve. So we went out, took a look, looked at what would be required from a permitting standpoint. This was presented to Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee last week or the week before, and they approved for this to move forward. And essentially, we're just asking for the board's approval so we can complete what needs to be done for that. I will say the version that you see, Tony had some comments, basically asking us to incorporate review of the municipal uniform traffic control devices, the MUTCD manual for compliance of what the improvements would be. So nothing other than just a clarification on reference to that.
Yeah, and if I may, just following up with what Danny said, is that as opposed to just providing the authorization to do the design work, the first preliminary step would be whether or not the requested for which the designs would take place are consistent and compliant with the manual of uniform traffic control devices. And the one that particularly caught my eye was the relocation of a golf cart crossing to ensure that what is proposed is consistent with the MUTCD. so that there isn't a question about us not being in compliance, creating exposure for liability. So that's been added to the scope of work, that the benefit to making the improvements is subject to the determination that they are compliant with the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices.
Question?
Tinkle?
Yeah, Danny, this is in the city of Fort Myers.
Yes,
Yes.
Has anybody talked to the fire department there? Because we brought this same issue up in Gateway Greens. Of course, we're Lee County, and they absolutely vehemently were opposed to rumble strips on any roads because of fire and emergency equipment.
We'll certainly add that to our to-do as we're going through this, but I haven't done anything on the project, obviously, yet. So.
That's the only thing I saw that would be something that I could see them objecting to, but that's a minor item on there. But everything else I didn't see.
Ed, is it possible you're confusing rumble strips with those humps?
They defined any type of an elevation as a restriction.
I don't think it
Maybe Lee County
has an elevation.
I'm sorry.
I said I don't think a rumble strip qualifies as an elevation.
I bring it up just somebody needs to check it. We were trying to do the same thing in some areas here to reduce traffic speed, and they made it clear that they would not allow it.
Ed, we've done some research on our safety committee, and you have three different types of, among many, three. You got humps, you got bumps, and you got rumble strips. And believe it or not, there's definitions for a hump versus a bump, and the definition for a rumble strip. And this does comply. Have no problem with checking with the fire department, but we have looked at it.
Okay.
And last speaker, please identify yourself.
Oh, Bob Gephardt, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, we have for consideration the task order. Is there any discussion on the task order? Could we get a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion approved. Second.
I have a question or an observation, if I may.
Mr. Guy?
In the third paragraph that's started with a dot, which starts the relocation of the golf cart crossing. If you go down to the 1, 2, 3.
That's been changed. The gold cart, that's been changed.
They're talking about gold carts. I think there should be a golf cart there. You may want to.
Yeah, that's when. Yeah, gold is when Danny had
corrected.
larger. Yeah, gold is when Danny had a larger fee in there. So.
Yeah, that's been corrected on the version that we were talking about earlier with the changes we made, referencing the MUTCD. We made that change as well.
Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I seconded it.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a second to approve the town optimization for Pelican Preserve roadway improvements. We'll go for the vote. Ms. Flaherty?
Yes.
Mr. Guy?
Yes.
Mr. Banks?
Yes.
Mr. Tinkle?
Yes.
Ms. Feinberg?
Yes.
Okay. Motion to approve passes 5-0.
So the other item we had was the just an update of work that's going on, and you've got our little table there. Basically, the bulk of the work that's been going on has been associated with the lake bank improvements. That work seems to be going pretty smoothly, but you see everything else that we have on there. If you have any questions?
Question?
Yeah.
Let me have trying to go back to, because I got off track with, let's go down the line like we do the vote and see if anybody has any questions.
I don't have, I'm just concerned about all the TVs or TBDs. There's no estimate. That's my concern. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Guy, any questions?
Nothing.
Mr. Banks, questions?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Mr. Tinkle, questions?
Yeah, Danny, are you going to stick around when we get into the budget? There's one item on the budget, that I wanted to hear your explanation on.
Yes, I will physically be on the phone. I will most likely be in a different location.
Okay, it'll wait.
Okay, and Ms. Feinberg, questions?
None.
Okay. Next, we'll move to district management reports. And what I will do is, instead of going through these, if there are any questions on any items, I'd be glad to entertain them. Kenny's here and also Brian's here, but I'll just go down the line with any questions. We did have, of course, irrigation restrictions that were in effect from the Water Management District, and they've also required that golf courses reduce their consumption. So we're working with the Gateway Greens Golf Course on that permitting and reporting for that. And also we sent out a notice to the homeowners associations that while Lee County has a 1-day irrigation restriction in effect, we're still on the 2-day because of our use of reclaimed water. But if there are any other questions, I'll start with Mrs. Flaherty.
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Guy, any questions on management reports?
No.
Okay, Mr. Banks?
Just two quick things, more as an update, but Chris and I have met a couple times to go through organizational alignment and some planning on that. So I think at some point, Chris is going to bring that back with some modifications. So we had some really good meetings, kind of looking through a couple different scenarios to align resources, and especially the current openings that we have, to come up with a strategy that I think best aligns to the current need and for future continuity's sake. The other piece is so I think we just need to update on the survey, Chris, the employee survey. I'm happy with. I think you and I had a brief conversation a couple weeks ago. I'm fine with sending that out. So I'm not sure what if anything's been done, but and I can circle back with Frank if he's still available to pin that down. But I didn't want to lose sight on that as we move forward.
No, the survey has been out and distributed on SurveyMonkey, and we do have some results, and I'll send them over to you after the meeting today. We don't have a large participation yet. I've been trying to encourage the staff to do it, but said that survey is out. And
so the survey's gone out and you've got the results?
Yes. And we just put those, printed them out today, have the file, and I was going to send those to you and the chair.
Okay.
Okay, that was through SurveyMonkey. And we're also looking at updating that and putting that out for our recreational facilities survey in the next month and making that available to the community. As you remember, we did put one survey out before and it wasn't a real high response rate. We put that out with the utility bill. But we'll be putting that out on SurveyMonkey to see what the priority is in the community. Okay. Then we'll move on to the action item agenda.
You didn't finish with supervisors asking questions on the management reports.
Okay. Sorry, Mrs. Feinberg, questions?
Mr. Tinkle would be before me.
Okay, Mr. Tinkle.
Yeah, two items, Chris. Can you take and give us some ideas? What is the percentage of water that we're bringing out of the ground for irrigation use right now as opposed to our wastewater reuse? Are we running 50-50, 60-40, what?
That typically runs more like 75% well water, 25% reclaimed water.
Okay, so we're running 1/4 of our water is reused, 3/4 is out of the ground.
And it changes according to the season and how many snowbirds are here.
Understand.
Season, it probably would go to a high of 60-40.
Yeah, I'm just very concerned with that number of them coming back and saying, you're predominantly taking groundwater, your reuse water is minimal, go to 1 day. So I want to keep tabs on that. The other one is you didn't say anything, and where do we stand on our financial staff? Where are we at on that?
Well, we have applications in, and we're going to start interviewing folks. Some phone interviews tomorrow and in-person interviews following that. And we're going to we have 2 positions open right now, and one is for the finance business manager and also that administrative assistant position. So we're following up the advertisement with the business manager with the administrative assistant, because we want that person to be in on the interviews and consideration for hiring that position.
Is that latter position currently unfilled?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll bring that in during the portion of the budget today and look at some of the proposed alignments that we've discussed.
And just to provide just a little bit of insight, since Ed, you had asked about that. So the conversation that that Chris and I had, we kind of went through roles and responsibilities. We looked at where the challenges are, and looking at the profiles that we could potentially attract and all that kind of good stuff. So we came up with a couple creative ideas, and I think ultimately, Chris, I think probably the next meeting would be a good time for you to come back and bring the new structure and kind of talk through it. But what's important about that is we felt like that business manager finance role, as much as that role I think had grown a little bit over the past year or so, with even Mike taking on some HR and some technology and some other things. I think where Chris and I landed is that the best opportunity is to scale that back and truly make that a finance, accounting, kind of business management, type role, and to look for opportunities to offset, some of the other things that we were trying to put in that role, because ultimately it's going to be more difficult to find someone that's, an accountant, CPA, finance person that also wants to do HR and technology and some of those other stuff. It became more of a catch-all. So I think where we landed was, let's get that finance position back to finance and tied more to what I call business support, business management type responsibilities. And then let's focus on some of the other stuff and see if we can either create a new role or do something. And I don't want to get too much in detail because I want Chris to kind of roll it out and it makes more sense. But it is pertinent because we are looking for that finance role today. So I think, Chris, if I'm not mistaken, where you are kind of direct on that is to get that role back to a true finance accounting type role.
That was the discussion we had because it was getting a little diluted with some of the other roles and the support roles and the amount of administrative work, especially in your HR, your insurance, and the IT support.
See if that backup person can't be assisting on that.
Right. Well, that's exactly what we're looking at, to split those roles out and responsibilities out. Okay, any comments, Mrs. Feinberg?
I had 2 questions, and one of them is on number 3 on the first page of this, the master lift station rehab. What is the location of that master lift station?
Right in front of Silver Lakes, our B9.
Okay. Thank you. I was curious about that. And on page 3 of the report, the 2 structures in Callaway Greens that are due for repair, when will that happen? When will that start?
Sorry, what was that? I missed.
2 structures in Callaway Greens, stormwater. Page 3, you're almost.
Yeah, the week after next.
That is 2 in Callaway Greens, leaking badly. When will that repair begin?
That will start the week after next, and those two pipes are compromised and causing settling and subsidence of the soil around them. And we have a firm coming in full repair is in place here. And the excavation.
Those were my questions. Thank you.
Then an echo.
Okay. And we'll move on to the next. And we have Mr. Rich. Right. As to the center equipment on the work.
Yep. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I can hear you okay twice.
Somebody has a cell phone and a computer going at the same time. There we go. He just turned it off. Is that you, Mr. Devane? Nope. All right. So somebody.
Want to present? He wants me.
That kind of thing. So somebody's turning the screen over to me, and I think I'm supposed to hit the applications and then share, correct?
Correct.
And now you have my screen. Let me move the presentation over. Screen.
He shared the wrong application.
I did?
Yeah.
What did I do wrong? It says here, hang on a second, I can go here. Stop sharing screen. Do you see me? Do you see my screen at all?
We see an Excel file.
Okay, well, you're seeing my screen then. Let me do this. Let me stop sharing screen. I don't want to stop sharing screen.
Are you sharing screen or a specific application?
No, screen.
We share an application.
Application.
Well, it told me to, on your instructions, it told me to click that. Somebody sent me instructions and it said, click on the application. So can we go back? I'm going to stop sharing screen, then maybe you can send it back to me.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Let's try it one more time. I promise I'm not technically inept.
Mr. Sanders, also, if you can send the documents you have to Chris for the record. This is Tony Pierce.
I already did it. I sent it to 3 different people. I think I sent it to Chris, I sent it to Leslie, I sent it to Kenneth. Okay?
Okay. Very good.
All right. So you put it up on the screen, right? But I can't control it. So are you giving me back share screen?
Yes, 1 second.
1 moment.
Not ready for prime time.
Do we have it? Not yet. I want to share screen. Okay, there we go.
Let him share the screen. Thank you.
Share it over this one. Okay, should have done it. Okay, hang on a second. I think we're almost there. Now, can you see? You got it. Okay, so you can see it now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what I wanted to do is take you through, because I don't know if all the board members are familiar with the history of the system, and I know Mr. Tinkle is. So, you know, and unfortunately I can't be there in person. I prefer to be there in person, but unfortunately we got this stuff going on and we're doing our virtual thing. So I think it helps everybody if everybody understands the full history of the system that brings to where you are today. All right, so if you'll bear with me, it won't take me that long, I promise. And so to review a little bit of the history, the contract to install the system was signed in September of 2014. Installation took place in 14 and 15. At this time, Severn Trent was contracted to actually run the utility operations. And so this led to the following decision for the installation of the system by contract from the city, which was the only person or the only group that could be contracted with to install the system was Severn Trent Services. So they were the installer by contract that the distributor that sold our product to you used. So I want everybody to understand that. As a result, and actually it was there were troubles from day one, because day one they walked in and said, we want to charge you a higher price than what we quoted you, because now that we actually see everything, we want more money. So the whole thing started off on that bad foot. They ended up leaving the project with all the difficult installs to still do. They just walked off and said, unless we get paid more, we're not doing it. And at that point, they hired, I think it was, I believe, a local contractor or somebody to come in and finish the bigger meters. So that just gives you a little history of the installation that we had. Immediately after that, there were all sorts of issues with the system. So Zenner sent their own team in to sweep the system. So at that time, we had 7,308 meters. Currently, you have 8,347 because of your growth. We serviced at that time 300 ETRs and MIUs, about 4% of the system. We could physically see needed service and wasn't reporting, and we replaced it. That was right after the installation was complete. So just to give you some perspective, so that was how the system started off. And so to give you some idea what we found in our initial sweep, and again, this is a review of information I presented to the city before. We found that there were a lot of wire damage. When what they did is they pre-wired the MIU and the unit to the meter, and then in the warehouse, and then carried them out to the pits by the wires, not by the heaviest part, the meter. The meter's quite heavy, and therefore they caused damages inside the potted wiring areas. And I show you a little example here. Does everybody can see me just fine so far?
Yes.
Okay, and stop me if you have any questions along the way, please. So just to give you an idea of the kinds of things. So here's what the encoder looks like externally, and you can see where the wire was initially when it was potted, and then some of the units after, you can see the initial ring has moved out, which means you've pulled the wire out some. Now that's very stiff potting in there. So now once you break that wire loose from the potting, I'll give you better pictures here in a moment, I promise. So I know everybody is like me, we wear glasses, hard to see some of these things. But what happens in a humid, wet climate is over time, if you have that, water will get in, or moisture will get in and contaminate the electronics. That's why you have potting. Unfortunately, they damaged a lot of that during the installation. So if we move down to the next slide, you'll see it's a little better. They cracked some of the containment. Without dwelling on that, you could, so the main thing here was there was a lot of initial damage by the installers of the system. So we looked at 452 locations in Gateway, 397 were good. This was another sweep we came back and did afterwards. 297 were good, 35 bad ETRUs, 13 dead MIUs, 3 damaged MIUs, 2 wrong meter numbers, on and on. But to give you more of a pictorial, this was the way we found some of the equipment on the initial sweep. The radial device, which you'll see are down at the bottom of the pits in the water, on their sides. They're buried. And what that does, see they're upside down here. They're supposed to be in lid locks inside the lids. Battery positive side up. If the batteries aren't positive side up, they self-discharge, just like your flashlight does. When you put you put new batteries in your flashlight, you put it in your cabinet. 6 or 10 months later, you go back to use it, it's dim or dead. That's because batteries self-discharge if they're positive side down. So if you're not aware of that, batteries self-discharge. That's why we have the equipment designed the way we do to put in lid locks. This is just to give you a pictorial, right? So one of the other issues that the city had early on was a lot of personnel changes. You know, we started off with Melissa Ivan Scott, then we had Cindy Ivan Scott, then we got Leslie finally, and of course we have Leslie and Kenneth, and both of them are very, very good, very easy to work with, good people, and they understand the system. They work very hard to understand the system. So we're really pleased with the stability we have now with the personnel that are there. So what we found, damaged products at customer sites, damaged by installer, battery failures in the stealth reader, ETR failures, meters. So now we'll get into a few more. Well, these are some more of the pictures. In that collage, you show these pictures more detailed. So this is a lid lock. It should sit in the lid like this, with a lid lock. And here you see them sitting in the pits. There were quite a few of them. In the beginning, there were a lot of them like that. We even found some where the batteries, the plate was off the bottom and the batteries were hanging out of the unit. So let's talk about, let's bring you currently up to date. Because I know the city is worried about, geez, we've had all these failures. And what happens when you start out a system like this, where the installer did not do a good job, is you will run into these problems later on. We don't know where they're going to appear, but ultimately you've depleted some of your battery, and now we don't know how long those batteries will last, or you have damaged the wiring and left some intrusion so water can get into the electronics, and over time, because it doesn't happen instantaneously, it could take years for you to get a mold growth on board and get a short that'll drain the batteries even faster. So what a short does is it basically, a mold will form between two connections and it'll cause more current draw. All right. So that's why you continue to have failures, right? It's not because we have a desire to continue to supply you brand new equipment for free. That's not our desire. It happened from the original installation. This is not something we see at many of our installations. So when you send in an RMA today, we look at it. And what we do, and in this case, I couldn't fit it all from the Excel file onto this one page, but basically this happens to be a recent RMA you sent in, and we look at it. Look at the voltages, we look at whether it's short, whether the batteries are dead, and then we come up with the final analysis. So you have, you know, the start, end read, and then the voltage. Of course, it's the green and red voltage, the different wires. And then what you do is you have final disposition. So here it says check wiring, check wiring. So we even have that this week. As you know, I had a team out there last week, or you may or may not know, but we had I put a bunch of people on the ground out there last week. We went through, we took care of all the MIUs, the non-reports. This week we have a guy out there, but your own team is checking wires. So there's some loose wires and they're checking those. That's what check wiring means on these. Factory reset, it's still good. You can reprogram it. So there's lots of little analysis that goes on when we get stuff back. But here are some of the current pictures of the ETRs, right, that we got back. And you can blow these up. Each one of these, you'll see a little damage. Now here's one, you'll see some broken ones like here. So again, over time, there's still damage happening to the units, and that could be from customers getting in the pits with stuff. It could be, you know, an animal chewing on a wire. It could be for a lot of different reasons. But we do get some damage. Now, that's not all of them, right? But we do get some damage. We do have ones where the batteries are just plain dead. And again, I explained that if over time you get water intrusion in that because the wire was pulled or there was too much weight on that wire when they installed it, those kind of things, then over time you will get a failure. So that's what these pictures are of, and you can see it. You can blow these up. You have a copy of it. Moving on, because I don't want to take a lot of your time, we'll get to the meat of this. When we look at returns, these are MIU returns. So here again, we do a complete analysis. It tells you whether the unit failed on check. So I'm getting that echo again. Did somebody just? All right, who has their cell phone and computer on? All right, went away. Okay. So here we have a failure. Here we have the items that they pass. So basically what we do, if the unit fails, right, because the batteries have failed in it, what we do then is we hook up an external power source so we can check everything else to see what's wrong with it. And if it's got over here, you'll see if it's got a bad batteries or something that we listed as we refurbished. If it's got a short that we could put new batteries in and send it back to you, but that's not going to give you long-term usage, then we don't do that. We send you a brand new unit. So that's what this report does. And here you'll see, again, these are new units and we get them, and many of them are damaged. The wires are damaged, and so that's just, now again, that's not a lot of them, but we still get some damage on the units. But let's talk about why units fail. Short on electronics that cause battery drain due from board not being cleaned properly. That could be a manufacturing problem. We see that in about 1.5% of the total population, right? That's what we see that happening in. Short caused by moisture intrusion, causing mold to grow on the board, and that's typically done when an installer hasn't been trained, didn't take care properly when he was installing the equipment, and that's where the wires are pulled away from the potting. There's enough separation that air can get through there, and especially moist air, like the air you have very humid air, gets through there and will get onto the board, and water or moisture is the worst thing that you can put on electronics. MIU loses timing and cannot connect. So like your laptop, if you were to stay off your laptop, take the battery out, right, and stay off it for a little while, plug it back in, when you connect to the internet is when your clock will reset in your computer. Well, the systems work the same way. So when the servers connect to the collectors, when the collectors connect to the MIU, all the timing is set that way. So if for some reason you have a unit that disconnects from the system, and I'm going to show you pictures of how that can happen, right? It disconnects from the system for some reason, it loses its timing. And remember, the timing is critical because they all come up every 20 minutes and talk for less than 6 seconds. They only broadcast for 1/8 of a second. So the time is very short. So if your timing clock gets off, it now comes up at the wrong time, can't find the network, and will continue to come up and waste its battery. So that's another reason that batteries go dead, is when the MIU loses its timing. Install not done correctly, unit is not in lid lock, causing battery drain, batteries upside down, causing accelerated failure, loss of timing, cannot connect, that'll drain the batteries. Cut wires that get wet, wires that are severed, and of course, normal electronic failure rates of typically about 1.5%. So those are the reasons you will see failures. Now, I want to point one thing out to the board because I know you're probably extremely disappointed in how the system has reacted, is that our warranty is for 10 years full, 10 years prorated, and we honor our warranty. What we have honored, even though you had installation problems, if you read our warranty, if an installer is not trained and certified to install the equipment and there's damage, which is the case of Seven Trent because they kept changing their people out and they weren't having us train them. They were sort of self-doing it, learning as they go. If you read this warranty stuff, you'll see that as a company, Zenner could have just threw their hands up and said, hey, not our problem. We didn't do that. We didn't do that. We have honored our warranty and replaced 100% of those ETRs. Every one you've sent us, we've replaced free of charge. We also have replaced all the MIUs, providing they weren't physically damaged or broken. We've done that. So to date, to bring everybody to date, Zenner has replaced 3,916 MIUs. The vast majority of those we sent back to you. We sent new ones because Leslie and Kenneth are great people to work with. We typically an RMA process is you pull the units from the ground, you send them back to us, we analyze them, we then send units back to you. We send units ahead of time to you so that you have them on the shelf, so that you can replace those units when they go bad in the ground. And we have replaced 1,729 ETRs. We have sent out our manpower teams on site and have bore all the costs. And we've done this, geez, Leslie, I didn't look it up, but Leslie, it's got to be 7 or 8 times. We've covered, is Leslie here with us, by the way?
Yes,
All right,
I'm here.
correct me wherever
I've
I'm.
been out annually, once a year, and then I think the initial, 2016, 17, you were out here 2-3 times.
But we have bore all the labor, rental cars, airfares, hotel, food and incidentals, and freight for that equipment. We have really tried as a company to stand behind this, even though, and I'm going to be honest, I don't feel, it's not a product problem. It was an installation problem. But we stand behind it. We like Gateway. We want Gateway system to be right. And we're going to continue to do the right thing for Gateway. I just want you to know that. So I'm going to show you some of the things last week that we found. So you see, and is Kenny there? Kenny, can you?
That's the mic.
We're on the mic.
Is Kenny there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Kenny. So Kenny thought one of the issues we had was when people pulled their lids off or customers pulled their lids off, they threw the lid, you can yank the wires, and that was causing some of the problems. So Kenny asked me, can I take these, bolt them into the side of the pits so that they're not in the covers? And quite frankly, the ones we looked at that Kenny showed me looked okay. They were still in the open and could communicate through the plastic lids very well. But Kenny, and again, Kenny, you did ask, and I did say okay. But when we look at the ones in the corner, that what they're doing is the ground is growing over them, and now you have enough dirt over them that some are disconnecting, and they're losing their timing and stuff. So if we can correct that, that'd be great. All right, so we did find that, Kenny. And again, that's not your fault. You asked, I said yes. Shame on Rich Sanders for not thinking about this before, but here's another picture, different customer. You can see where they're underneath the lid in the ground, and depending on which direction they're communicating in, that will cause interference and maybe disconnectivity from the system. Now, let me show you a few more pictures. Here's one where the actual lid lock, for some reason, these weren't in lid locks, and for some reason that lid lock broke. Somebody must have pulled it off and broke it one time. Just a couple more pictures here. Here's one we found, again, underneath the dirt, underneath the lip, underneath the dirt. And a lot of these, the grass and dirt grows over the corners pretty heavily. So getting those cleaned up. And of course, here's one we found with, again, the bottom off and the batteries out. So my suggestion is if we had somebody, I know that Gateway has had a shortage of personnel, right? And Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong again. I think you and I talked, you had some people that left and stuff, so you had shortage of people, you fell behind. If just one person, if you had one person just focus on this every day for 2 or 3 problems that popped up, it would be easy for them to take care of and keep up with the system. We would make sure, as we have, Leslie, that you have equipment on the shelf. We can even have somebody here, one of our engineers, look at and we do that anyway. When Leslie calls us and needs reports or wants us to look at a system, we break an engineer free and we do that for her. So I'm going to open the floor up to questions.
We'll take questions for Mr. Sanders in order, starting with Mrs. Flaherty. Questions for Mr. Sanders?
Thank you. You said there was an installation problem, and what I understand is that you were supposed to train the people for the installation. Okay, then okay. And are you going to continue training and support the staff there at Gateway?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay, I want to make sure. And and how long do you plan to do that for? Just for the 10 years or?
All right, so you really asked me 2 questions here. We're going to support that, and Leslie can probably speak better from her perspective. From a personnel and help perspective, Leslie, when you call up and need help, have you gotten it? Leslie?
Sorry, can you repeat that? It's Leslie.
Yeah, Leslie, when you've called up and you needed assistance with one of the engineers or somebody, have you gotten the help and assistance you needed?
Yes, right away.
And
we did have some new staff, and we were also able to go out and get some retraining in Punta Gorda as well to confirm that our staff is in line with the practices that they should be following.
Right. So, Ms. Flaherty, let me answer your question because you asked. So we originally trained the Severn Trent people, but they were so unorganized that they would have 2 guys on site. The next week they would have 4 guys that had never been trained, and it was just a mess from the start. And I can say this: the distributor that was awarded the job tried a number of times to get permission to change contractors. And at that point, Severn Trent, who was running the utility for the city, refused to do it. They wouldn't do it. So just to give some sort of understanding as to the issues, and trust me, I get heartburn every time I load up a product that I have to send to replace this stuff. It hurts because we're bearing that financial burden, and so I don't like it. I knew it was coming from the start. I didn't like the situation with that installer and contractor. But to answer your question fully, we did train them initially. They kept putting different people in there, which is evident. They didn't really want to do the job. They were picking and choosing the meters they would install. Some of the installs were done so poorly. Some of the meters were in backwards. Tons of problems. Mr. Tinkle probably remembers some of those days because he was looking at that from the outside. So, but we have stayed the whole time.
Richard, can we continue? Can we ask you some more questions because we don't have a whole lot,
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I want to make sure that Kathy was done with her questions.
I actually wasn't, okay? But I want to know, you're going to continue with the training with the staff too? Is that,
We have trained the staff. The staff is trained.
okay?
My suggestion is if you don't have enough people that you hire, another person to just focus on the system itself.
Okay, now, when when the utility people read this, these machines, what is the percentage of the read rate that we should have?
What you should have
Mm-hmm.
is 99.5%.
Okay,
And you're quite capable of getting there. It's just the units that have failed that didn't allow you to get there. I looked at the reporting percentage just today, and I saw that it was up to 98%, 97.9% or something. So it's climbing. As we fix the stuff that will climb, we should get to 99.5%. Leslie's very, very astute and on top of that. And so is Kenneth.
and so you're still working on the problem, correct?
I have a guy on the ground out there, and so you have your team members working on it as well.
Okay, that's all the questions I have right now. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Guy? Mr. Guy, questions?
Just one, do you have any suspicion that there are persons who are trying to make problems for this installation?
No, I don't. I most of this stuff, I mean, you're always going to have a number of problems because people open their lids up, don't take care of it. You'll have some customers when you say that, I don't mean somebody's out there going pit to pit trying to sabotage stuff, but you'll get some customers that'll toy with their stuff, They'll think, what is this? Can I get my water bill cheaper? And, yeah, you'll have some people do that. What you should be doing is putting stickers on your pits that say that everything in this pit belongs to the water utility, and you'll be fined if anything's destroyed.
When you were in the sales mode for this system, my recollection is that you or one of your associates said that the error rate was in or near 1% on these things.
1.5%. You are correct. It's not error rate, failure rate. You can expect a failure rate of about 1.5% a year. That's correct.
Well, it seems like there are many times 1.5%.
I'm sorry. Repeat that again.
It seems like the failure rate is many, many times 1.5%.
Oh, absolutely.
The current rate is 70% failure.
Which is why I was suggesting, I guess, that there may be some sabotage going on out there.
No.
You see the battery sitting outside the unit. Even smart squirrels don't do things like that.
No, that's true. And I've had squirrel problems. They're not smart enough to do that. But again, there might be a few customers out there that'll play with it, but I don't think they're going to other people's homes and doing that. I think that's the question you're asking me. Are they doing it on a broad basis?
Yes.
No. Most of the failure rates are the water intrusion. We can actually see the wires that were pulled out, and then when we do our analysis on the unit, and we're doing that for you guys, and it's expensive for us to do that because it takes time to do each one of those. It's cost me about $22 to analyze each unit. But we're trying to look for data, and without a doubt, you can drag that all the way back to the installation phase where they were upside down for a period of time and the batteries died prematurely now a couple years later because they were drained. We don't see, if we saw a lot of sabotage, we'd let you know. We'd let you know. But there are some customers messing with it, obviously. You're right. Batteries don't pop out of the bottom of those on their own. You don't break the plastic off one of the encoders naturally. It happens because somebody did it. But it's a small percentage. It's not a huge percentage of what we're seeing.
Thank you.
Mr. Guy, any other questions?
Pardon?
Any other questions?
No, that's all for now.
Okay, Mr. Banks, questions?
Yeah, and Richard, thanks for coming in today and giving us the preview of your analysis. Can you tell me, I think you might have had in the beginning of the presentation, but I didn't capture it. What's the total number of meters installed today? It was 8,000.
Yeah, so you have, right now you have on the system, 8,247.
8,247. And Chris, do you know, if Kenny's in there too, how many meters did Severn Trent install?
7,308. That's the first number. That was the initial number of meters installed. Now, whether Severn Trent, and I don't mean to jump in front of Kenneth, but I looked that up this morning. So 7,308 was the original.
Hey, Richard, if you don't mind, I'd like Kenny to answer the question. Kenny, how many meters did Severn Trent install? Do we know what that is?
Mr. Max, we don't have that accurate number on the actual installs.
Okay, but is Richard's comment, is that directionally correct? Was it about 7,000?
I would say so.
Yeah, that'll be about right in that area, yes.
Okay. So, Richard, we're trying to get to root cause, and I had a bunch of questions, and I think you answered, or at least provided information on a lot of those in your intro. The first thing I was going to ask is, when equipment gets returned back to you, you do an assessment, and you went through that. You said, yes, we do a review of every piece of equipment that gets returned, and you cited several causes of failure. Can you? What I didn't see was a percentage. I know you said like 1% here, 1%, for something else. Have you provided that information to Kenny or to Leslie to see of the roughly 5,646 meters that have been defective and returned? What's the percentage of defects that you've identified, and are what's your degree of confidence that out of 5,645, somewhere roughly around there, which is about 70% of meters installed, have been defective and had to be replaced? And I don't know if that defect rate is reoccurring. So, and I think, Kenny, we may have talked about this in the past, but what I'm hearing you say is, and you've been pretty straightforward, is that out of this 70% defect rate, the 500 or 5,645, that these are all installation problems and these are not any type of equipment failures. And that's both from an MIU, which is about 4,000, and about 1,700 ETRs. You stand by that?
So let me correct you on one thing. All right. So because if you look at what's in a pit, the MIU and ETR are two pieces of electronics. So when you say that it's a 70% failure in electronics and you're only counting the MIU installs, right? You're only counting half.
Well, the MIU failures
I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
The MIU failures, that's about 50%, and ETRs is about 20%. But if you combine them, and you might have had an MIU and an ETR failure in one count. So the 70% is a combined total failure, but MIUs are failed at 50%, and ETRs at 20%.
Yes, if you look at it from a population standpoint, that's correct.
Yeah.
But it's not 70% combined, because you literally have 14,000 pieces of electronics on the ground that are different, not 7,000 that you're getting your 70% from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I'll say it in these terms, that there's been 5,640 something defective units. My question is that you're saying that the reason these are defective, which could have caused a an issue with the unit is due to installation. So when you do your test, you were saying this, if it was something with wiring, you could trace that back to, you gave an example of the cord being pulled out, and I guess you had cited seeing someone carry the units by the cord, not by the unit. Others, battery failures. That battery failure, based on your review, kind of making maybe some assumptions, but some are based on your observations where the batteries might be put upside down or whatever. We would need to get to the root cause to say, do any of these defects, are they related outside of installation? Is there any, you guys tested, have you said, hey, well, maybe we got a couple bad units here?
Yeah, absolutely. We, again.
But that's not 1.5%, or that's 1% or 2% defect rate. That, okay, that's probably expected.
Exactly. And we look, and let me tell you what else I've done. I've actually gone back to all the way down to the components on the board and said, okay, because you guys are in a hot, wet climate, if I look at my amp or I look at some of the components that drive the amount of current you use, we've gone back to manufacturers. I've literally spent a little over $100,000 doing component analysis to make sure I didn't have a broader problem. And I've done all that, and we don't. The components are checking out, everything's checking out. Battery manufacturers checked out the batteries. I've had, and we've done everything we can to make sure that we don't have a broader problem, because the last thing I want to do is continue to produce equipment that might give me problems later, and that's not what we're in the business for. We are not, our business model does not want to be replacing every unit in the field. And again, I can assure you, we're not seeing this across the board in all our other customers. We're not seeing it. You're not the only one who's ever had a bad installer, let me say that. But we don't see it at all our customers. The guys who've done a good job installing, where we've had our contractors in there that we've approved, their systems are running fine. We've had systems in the ground for, going on 12 years now with some of our customers. So it is, like I said, it is a problem you have from your installers. Trust me, I don't like it. I don't like it any more than you do. I really don't.
And the installation issue, again, you didn't see any correlation to the network design or the, what was by design, the way the units were installed. So no issue with design, no issue with equipment. It's installation defects. I'm sorry, defects as a result of the installation process, in your opinion, not being performed under someone that is certified and acting in, in
a responsible manner. Yeah, yes, absolutely. It's the vast majority of the problems you're having are because of that installation.
Well, it shouldn't be vast majority. It should be pretty much, except for less than 2%. I'm going by what you've said. Is you should have expected less than 2% defect rate. That's what you've seen with other customers. Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure I'm clear on that. And Richard, do you have you supplied any other customers that are comparable in scale, that we could reach out to just to see if there's, how they've installed or their system, to see if there's any issues, or have you done any compare and contrast on your end?
Oh yeah. We have customers who've had our systems for years and years, and they get it. They understand how to maintain their systems, and they've had them for years. Yeah, I'd be happy to let you talk to some of the customers who've had the systems for a long time. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Kenny, I have a question directly for you. So if Severn Trent installed about 7,000 of these, and about 70%, cumulatively have failed out of the total 8,000. How many has our staff replaced where we've also had additional issues after that? So have we had double warranties for any meters that our staff has installed, and that we feel confident that the installation process was done to par?
Let me answer.
Yeah, whoever wants to answer it, Leslie or Kenny, doesn't matter.
The first 2 years, we didn't have any reoccurring. This last year, fiscal 19, I believe we had 40. But I didn't have enough information to really do an analysis of why they were reoccurring. I'm not sure if it was wiring or I don't have any information regarding that right now, but I had 40.
Okay, so Leslie, and again, and I'll make this short, guys. I know you, other board members have questions. So out of that 8,000, a little bit over 8,000 we installed, we've had about 5,600 defective units. We have replaced those, and of the ones that we've replaced, we have had let's say a relatively small number of defective products. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
And Doug, right?
Yes, sir.
We actually track serial numbers, so we know when if we get a number back that is more recent, we know that. So I mean, we track that as well. So if she has a failure that is more recent, then we would have that in our numbers.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for me.
Okay, Mr. Tinkle, questions?
Sure. Rich, thanks for coming, and thanks for really being forthcoming with your answers so far. I want to go back to the very beginning of this situation. This project was publicly bid, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Were there specifications or documents that mandated that ST would be the installer of the products regardless of who the low bidder was?
They specified that they wanted that Severn Trent to be that installer. It was in their contract they provided.
So regardless of whether we would have gone with Zenner or any of the other meter manufacturers, ST would have been the installer.
Yeah, we were against using them.
Okay, don't go down that road, because you and I are on the same page on that, so we don't go down that road. You're preaching to the choir on that one. This one is a strange situation. The bidder, as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the bidder was Fortiline.
That's correct, a distributor.
They were your distributor in this area, so their name was on the bid for furnishing and installing these, and they, through a subcontractual relationship, were forced to use Severn Trent to install the meters.
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You indicated earlier, and I was inside the loop back when this occurred, but you said for the first time that there was a request. I don't know if it was by Fortiline or if it was by ST for more money. I don't see how ST had any standing. Subcontractors in my business, in this construction industry, they're lower than earthworms. They don't have any standing. It's the prime. Did Fortiline come to the board asking, demanding additional change in unit price to satisfy their sub?
So I can, not knowing the exact line of events, I can tell you that on day one, because my guys were on the ground, Severn Trent came in and said, we're not going to start work until we get an increase in price for the installations. Now, that would have had to go back through Fortiline, and then Fortiline would have had to ask for that. That's how I think it happened. But, somehow it got resolved, and there's a lot of emails flying around. I'd have to go back through the archives.
I understand.
Hey, Rich, Dan Devane here. I was actually there. That's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The issue I was trying to get through is that we had a public bid, just to make sure I got this understood. We had a public bid Florida Line supplied the bid, and they supplied the bid, I'm assuming, based upon some contractual price proposals given from Severn Trent to them for installation. I mean, I've been around a long time, but I've never seen anything like this mess.
Well, just look at the contract.
Where one bidder is giving Florida Line, your rep, a bid to install your equipment, and going to another competitor, giving them a price to install their meter, going to another company, giving them a price to install their meter. I've never seen anything such a farce like that.
Well, all you got to do is read the contract language you guys, not you, but the city created that I put in here. The contractor shall not use any other subcontractor supplier other than those detailed in its submittal to the owner. Zener USA is the manufacturer of the meters and the provider of hardware software, and Severn Trent Service as the installer of the meters, all as detailed in the proposal. Severn Trent, they were told Severn Trent will bid you for the install. They will be your installer. I remember it clearly. I highly recommended against it.
Thank you very much, and I think we're on the same page. When you found out that your firm was awarded via Florida Line the bid on this project, and we knew at that time, notwithstanding the issues about wanting more money for installation, had Severn Trent ever installed a Zener meter?
No.
Okay. Who trained Severn Trent on, you indicated earlier that you had some changing of employees and personnel, which complicated the issue, but was the training of the installation and all the nuances of the Zener meter, you don't hold it by the wire and all those things, was that training of Severn Trent done by Florida Line or by you or by both of you?
By Zener. And we had our guys on site. We trained their initial crew, and then they changed those people out. And so now you got people that weren't trained by us doing it. And even the guys we trained were sloppy. They were just terrible. We checked their work the first couple of days. We checked their work. It was sloppy. We corrected them. It was just, I'll tell you, it was a tough situation.
My next question you may or may not want to answer. Were you put on or put under any pressure by any member of the Board of Supervisors of this board at that time, and or by any representative of this organization to basically go away with your concerns about the issue of utilizing Severn Trent?
It would probably be more appropriate to ask Florida Line that question.
Okay.
Because, you know, everything went back through Florida Line. We were, you know, they're the main, they're the prime. You're going to go back through Florida Line. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's very honest. Who was the inspector on behalf of, I don't even know how to answer this, it's so stupid. Who was the inspector of this project? Was it Severn Trent as our project district manager inspecting their own work? Who was the inspector out here watching all this stuff?
You know, that's a good, that would have to be the subcontractor and the utility employees.
That, no, you didn't have any feedback from any inspector of the district. Well, it wouldn't be to you because it would have been to Florida Line. That's our point of contact. To your knowledge, Florida Line never received anything from us or our inspector, if we had one, telling you and making you aware of these concerns that we're now talking about.
Not until after after they walked off the project at the end, Severn Trent walked off, stuff wasn't reporting. And that's where we said, okay, we'll come in and sweep the system. We'll look at every box and get that reporting to where it should be, which is what we did. So we did that after Severn Trent walked off and left the work looking like a bunch of junk.
Okay, no,
Mr. Tinkle, this is Dan Devane with Zener here.
Hi, Dan.
I don't remember any anybody from the district actually going out and doing any inspections. I could be wrong about that, but I was involved in all of the initial meetings and everything else, and I don't remember them ever actually appointing anybody to oversee and be out there on a daily basis.
I think the two of us have the same opinion. Going on, following up on what Doug asked, Rich, I'm going a little bit deeper. In the 2014-2015 era, when we wrote the specifications and bid this project, did you have installed places where you provided meters very similar to the specifications that were written for Gateway? And I don't care about ones done in Ohio or the northern climates. I'm talking about, was there any places, let's say in southern Texas, southern Florida, Louisiana, southern climates, where you could reference us to people that installed this type of meter under similar, let's say, environmental conditions? And so who are those cities, towns, districts, whatever?
We have a few in Alabama. I'm trying to think in the 2014 time frame, Dan, in Florida, you would know. I know we got some in Alabama. We got, let me see, southern Texas was subtropical.
Do you have anything here in Southwest Florida? Any meters installed on or about 2014, 2015, 2016?
Dan?
You guys were the first we did in South Florida as a system.
Okay. That's fair.
I'm sorry, I refer to Dan because there's so many systems around the country. I'm just trying to think what we had in South Florida.
I understand it. What I'm looking for is I'd love to hear somebody that used a different installer, because that seems to be the road that this is taking right now. I'd like to see somebody else that installs similar meters, similar design, similar requirements that were on or about the time we did it, talking to them to see, have you had these issues relative to installation? I usually the jungle drums beat pretty loud in this business, and I've not heard it.
I don't think you necessarily need to look at anything in Florida. And the reason I say that is you're either going to have a good installation or a bad installation. And most of the experiences we have been really positive experiences with installers. But I will tell you, when you don't have a positive experience with one, they have the ability to pretty much sabotage a project. And we've had a number of them in Tennessee where we've had them put in that really, no problems after the fact.
Okay, thank you. The ETR issue, I'm really concerned about that. Is the problems that we are now having with the ETRs that seem to surface after the fact? In other words, some time elapsed.
Right.
Are you of the opinion that those could possibly be tied to or connected with poor installation, whatever, associated with the MIUs?
Yeah, they are right here. You can see inside. If you look at this, so inside that little cube are these 3 blocks, right? And you have your 3 wire terminals. And then what happens is this little block goes over it, and it's filled with hard potting. So the wire is completely sealed. Everything is moisture proof, right? IP68. And then what happens when you pull on that wire, right? You put the weight of the meter on that wire, and it pulls out a little bit. Now you've loosened it away from the potting. And over time, and that's why you're seeing over time, what happens is your air will get in there with moisture, especially in a humid climate, and it'll settle around the board, and you can develop a short that gives you a higher current draw, which drains your battery.
Rich, do you have a good picture there for the rest and the benefit of the other board members? A good picture that shows the ETR in relationship to the MIU and any physical connections between those two to demonstrate what you're talking about?
Yeah, give me 1 second because I'll bet you in one of these pictures. All right. So here is here's the meter.
Yes,
Here's the ETR sits on top, right?
that little black device.
Right, the black device. And then this long wire here, you'll see it go here and it goes all the way to the MIU. All right.
Was that the wire that we saw in the previous picture connecting to that?
Yeah, well, actually, you'll see it on a piece of, you'll hang on a second. So you'll see it spliced together. So there's a wire off of the MIU and there's a wire off of the ETR and they're spliced together. And let me find one where we got a picture of, oh, here's the splice right here. See this?
Yes.
That's a little, so we splice them with UI connectors and then stick them in a grease pod to keep it moisture proof, right? And and that's why I was explaining to Doug that this and this are really two different electronic pieces. They're not one and the same. So
I realize that.
There's really 14,000 pieces of electronics. But that's what, does everybody get that now? How that connects?
Yes, I want everybody to see that. Thank you.
What you really have is a 10-pound water meter with, if someone wants to, and we tell them not to do this, they grab that cable and they're carrying it from wherever they did the potting, probably putting it in the back of a pickup truck, then carrying it from the pickup truck to the meter box, all the time swinging it because the meter's flowing right underneath them. It's swinging and pendulum back and forth. And it's putting all of the pressure on that spot in the picture.
This picture right here, what we're seeing is the connection from the MIU to the ETR, correct?
Well, yeah, that's right here, yeah.
And those little holes there are where you screw the ETR down into the meter.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. At any time when you were bidding this project, obviously you had to put in, Fortiline had to put in a price for the furnishing and installing this. Was there, usually there's paperwork that goes back and forth. A supplier, unlike a sole source here, others, you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 vendors that install these that are giving you quotes. In this one, you only had one. Was it a one-sided negotiation? Were you given a price and said, hey, we're in, we're going to be doing this job. Here's our price, live with it?
No, we basically, let me say this. Pricing for the equipment, we gave the Fortiline. Fortiline had to do
installation.
Well, that would be a Fortiline question, but again, I assure you, we objected immediately when they told us it was going to be Severn Trent.
I'm sorry?
We objected immediately when they told us it was going to have to be Severn Trent. We objected to it. And I know Fortiline objected to it as well. So,
do you know, did you know that any of the other meter vendors, did they object also?
I have no idea.
Okay,
no idea.
Can you ask Richard real quick, I hate to jump in, but ask him why were they rejecting Severn Trent?
Because we had knowledge of
their installation.
Yeah,
you guys double talked. What'd you say?
We have heard about their installation quality from other people.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, and I sincerely appreciate you coming. I hate the situation under which we had to do this, but you've been very forthcoming with your answers. Thank you very much. I have no other questions.
All right.
Rich, this is Leslie. The ETRs that you have the image on the screen,
yes.
What is the percentage that were directly related to the wires or the equipment being broken like that? Were all of them related to?
No, we have a few that had a the reset problem, Leslie, that you had was a matter of instead of reprogram, as you know, we have a new piece of software that we put in. So the newer ones have the newer software, and we've been giving those to you. so you don't have resets. Hall effect switch can go bad occasionally, but the vast majority of them, again, are because of the batteries dying because there's a short across those boards. We've actually opened some of these up, and we actually carved away the potting and stuff without trying to tear the components off the board, and we've actually seen the growth on the boards. So we know it was moisture intrusion.
That is done.
Ms. Feinberg, questions?
May I ask one more?
I do not have any at this time. I think that the other board members have pretty much asked all the questions that are pertinent here.
May I ask one question?
Absolutely.
Did you supply us 100% new equipment, or was some of it remanufactured on initially?
Oh, 100% new.
Thank you.
And we provided you almost 100% new, and Leslie can probably, again, agree with what I'm saying. Even on our replacements, we've given you 100% almost all new product. Leslie, when you say that's true, very few remanufactured product.
Correct. Correct.
We really want your system. We feel as bad as you do for the way your system is operating. We
Rich,
as a company don't want you to think that we're not a good company.
Rich, can I ask you one other question I just thought of?
Yep.
So what is your contractual relationship right now with Fortiline involved in all this? Would it be appropriate for us to ask Fortiline some questions on this? Are they in this game at all? Do they have any skin in this at this point in time? Because it sure seems to me they do.
We're still our distributor. They still care about you as a good customer. And I think, wasn't Rick invited to this call? Rick, are you on the line?
Rich, I've been here the whole time. I've been listening to this. I've just been kept quiet. What I'd like to do, I came on board here around 2017, about June or July. So I missed the inception of this job taking place through the bidding process and everything. What I'd like to do with Doug and the gentleman speaking now, who am I speaking with here?
Mr. Tinkle.
This Ed Tinkle.
Ed, yeah, this is Rick Kemp. We'd like to maybe get up with you again very soon. I've got to go back and do some digging with Keith Young, who was involved with this from the inception, and get some more details on how this whole thing came about from an accuracy standpoint. If that's okay with you.
If you've been online, Rick, if you've been online the whole time, then you've heard the whole discussion. Was there anything that
yes, sir,
that I said or Rich said that would be, let's say, contrary to what you at Fortiline believe to be the case?
No, the way the protocol is on these and their bid, I mean, no, you all are both spot on. We just have to find out if there's any paperwork out there as far as our involvement with Severn Trent. Like I said, I wasn't involved with this. We do have some gentlemen who have tested knowledge from the beginning, and I want to make sure I speak with them to get all the information, kind of obtain, review it, and discuss it with you just to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's.
Okay, refresh my memory. Who was our point of contact with Fortiline when this thing was bid? I'd know the name if I heard it.
It was probably Rick. I forgot his last name. I know he has since retired.
Tyson
Fountain. Yeah, Rick Fountain.
Yes, you're right. Okay.
And Ed, in the proposal that Fortiline submitted, they listed Anthony Graham at Zenner, Rick Fountain at Fortiline, and Frank Branch at Severn Trent. That's in their proposal.
Okay.
Guys, thank you again. I have no other questions now.
Okay. Is there any other questions from anybody?
I don't have a question. I just want to make a point. This is not only time consuming for our staff, but we do have a dedicated person that's just to focus on metering. However, when these errors and these issues start to come up, it's just too overwhelming for just one staff member to handle. And we cannot add additional members because it just takes them away from the ability to do the other utility work. So we really do need to get caught up because it is creating an issue with billing and time consuming. It consumes 40% of my time. I do appreciate Rich's assistance in this, but when our numbers get this large, we just don't have the staff or the capability to handle it.
Well, Leslie, hopefully we're going to get caught up here. By the end of next week, we should be all caught up with our guy on the ground there and the team I had there. I had 5 guys there last week, 4 guys. But we will get you caught up and we'll try to stay on top of it with you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else for Mr. Sanders?
Thanks again for coming.
Yes, thank you for your time.
More than happy to do it. I'd like to, as soon as we get off this quarantine of virtual conferencing, I'd like to come and say hello to everybody in person.
That would be nice.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I have to turn this back over to you now, don't I?
I can disconnect you now and then I'll take over. Give me 1 second.
Have a great day.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Someone is.
East Timber Creek.
Are we on a break?
No, we were.
No.
Like a break, we're ready to move on.
No, I just took one. I just wondered if we went on one. It got real quiet.
Yeah, we will move to agenda item 3B, which is a bond release for Timber Creek. And this is a performance bond that we've been holding on to for a little more than 3 years, which was 10% of the original bond amount, $61,808. The time to return that bond, that 3-year period, and ended in March, and we've had a request to return that. We haven't had any issues or any known defects in there, so the staff recommendation is to return the $61,808.48 of that bond as we pass the 3-year maintenance period. Questions? Yes.
Have we received all the as-built from that project and test results, everything else that's all 100% complete to release the bond?
Yeah, we received all that information during the conveyance, and I have the background information when that was all ratified and when they transferred over the 10% bond period.
Unless one of the other board members have any questions or other issues, I would recommend and make motion to release the performance bond.
Are there any other questions from board members?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll go for the vote. Mrs. Flaherty?
Yes.
Mr. Guy?
Yes.
Call me, Chris.
Just voting for releasing the Timber Creek bond.
Yes.
Excuse me. And Mrs. Feinberg?
Aye.
Okay, we have a 5-0 vote to release the performance bond for Timberwood Preserve.
Chris, just a matter of clarification so that somebody reading the minutes don't get confused. The minutes or the agenda shows it as Timber Creek. It should be Timberwood Preserve. Timber Creek is our neighbors to the east.
Right, it's Timberwood Preserve is the performance
Yeah, I don't think they want us releasing their bond yet.
We don't even have one. The next item is really for information only, and it has to do with the proposed 221 unit development at the corner of Gateway and Griffin Drive. It's not really for any action, and we haven't had a formal proposal or application for development on this project yet. However, we did have a phone meeting with the engineer, and that's Rick Berlansky at Holmontes, and I've attached a memorandum that they provided to us in a site map, and it basically talks about the stormwater situation for that property, and their position is that the project does not require any additional stormwater quality treatment on site, and it's already in place and as part of the operational master plan for that tract. So they're planning on discharging into the adjacent lake and feel they have the permits in place to do that with permits that were previously granted, and the Water Management District seems to agree with them.
Comment?
We will, of course, review and ask the district engineer to review the permit applications when they were submitted to ensure this was the case. But again, this is an informational item, and it appears that project is moving forward.
Comment, Chris?
Yes, sir. Comments?
I looked through all of the information that they supplied, and everything looked to me hunky-dory. I didn't see any issues, but I would defer to Danny just to check and make sure there wasn't something that I certainly missed. But it looks to me like they followed the rules. Not that I'm supporting or not that I'm buying anything that they're putting on that property. That's a whole different issue. But it does look to me like they followed the rules, and the cause they present for the reasons, the justifications, I think they look pretty firm ground.
And we'll be following their permit application into the Army Corps, and as soon as they put a permit application and development application into us, we'll bring that forward to the board and post it on the website, because this project has garnered a lot of citizen interest.
Yeah, I'd like to have Danny's input to just verify that I didn't overlook anything, but it did look like they dotted the i's and crossed the t's, but I would defer to Danny.
Okay, comments from any other board members?
I have one question, Madam Chairman.
Go right ahead.
Are we going to have any difficulty supplying potable water or other utilities to this large project?
No, sir, not at all. The utilities are adjacent to the project, and we have capacity in that system to supply them water, sewer, and irrigation water, so that's not an issue.
Bill?
I have no idea what he said, but that's okay.
Margaret, may I say something? Madam Chairman, may I say something?
I'm sorry, my computer just reconnected. I don't know what was going on, so go
Bill
right
didn't
ahead.
hear. I wanted to say to Bill what Chris just said is that I don't think we have a utility issue. However, I think I want to reserve my opinion on the issue of the transportation issue that Mr. Senior brought up in his deal. I think that is a serious issue on the ingress and egress of 221 people trying to get out on Gateway Boulevard. However, they try to get out on Gateway Boulevard in light of this.
How about 221 times 2?
I like that number even better.
Yeah.
And I'll also mention on the site plan, you notice that the building, they have a couple buildings, not the whole site, but the parcel adjacent Griffin Drive is vacant. And it appears they could place a 7-Eleven or a gas station or another commercial development.
That's a real good point. They've got about 3.5 acres of that 17-acre site that is not identified. And I've asked about that. The last thing I want to see is somebody try to do an end run in 2-3 years, come back and try to stick 2 more or 3 more buildings on there and take that 221 and get back to their original 360, 370.
That could very well be what they have in mind.
I'm sorry?
I said that could very well be what they have in mind.
And that's a very well in what I think they got in mind. Need some clarification on that undeveloped portion that borders Griffin Drive, exactly what their intent is, if that's commercial. And as we've all seen, whether you like it or not, this assessment methodology stuff that Russ presented, if you go to commercial, the commercial traffic is worse than if it were residential. So we got to be careful what we allow or what we see coming into that piece that borders onto Griffin Drive right there at the intersection. That could be a disaster.
Any other comments?
There's some talk going around that the Miami company who's in charge of this may be putting low-income housing there.
I hope that was a joke.
I wish it were.
It sure as heck better not be.
Where did you hear that, Bill?
I read that from Doug, what's his last name? The Wrights Gateway son, that you don't read.
Jeff Koons?
Oh. No.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that. I hope that's not correct.
Well, I could be
I don't know
talking
if
through my hat, but I just wanted to get that out in case you hadn't read it.
I don't believe that it's being classified as low income as opposed to being affordable.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
That's a distinction without a difference.
It's ambiguous at best, but that typically is, people use affordable housing as opposed to low income. They can be quite different, but I don't know. I don't know what you're referring to, Bill, but I think I saw something around affordable as opposed to low income, but don't quote me on that.
Chris, can you keep us up to speed as to when this group tries to go for plat approval, that we just don't sit back with our twiddling our thumbs when they go for plat approval?
Hey, Ed, this is Tony. If they are going to build an apartment complex, or if they are going to do a condominium, they don't necessarily need to plat.
Say that again?
If they take the site that they have, if they are not going to subdivide it any further, that's usually when platting comes into play. If they're going to build an apartment complex and one entity owns all the units, I don't know if they have to plat or replat anything. Or if they decide to do a condominium development for the residential piece, they would do a condominium declaration of covenant, but not necessarily a plat that we used to, like the gateway plats.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's just something we may want to double check with Lee County Community Development, Randy, or Randy or Dave, and just double check as to what process, depending upon whether it's an apartment owned by one entity or a condominium complex, what regulatory processes do they need to go through?
I just want to make sure we don't fall asleep at the switch.
Again, what we may just want to do is once a week make a public records request to the Community Development Department and all the applicable departments, building department, et cetera, whether or not any applications for any permits or development orders have been applied. Maybe just a standing once a week, send it out every Friday or every Monday.
Well, is this not this question that they raised, that Rick Brylansky at Homontis raised relative to the stormwater? Isn't that a precursor of where they're going next?
Yes, but it doesn't indicate the form of ownership per se, or whether or not they're going to split it or plat it.
Well, I think just personally, I think from what I've heard here in Gateway, because we're real close to it, is that if they were going with a condominium complex, the number of people that would be so violently opposed to a apartment complex would not be as violently as opposed to a condominium complex where you have owners and you have equity.
Oh, no, I understand. But again, from whether or not there a platting or replatting or lot split is required, it may, if none of those happen, you may never get a notice, or other than once a week sending, like I said, an email to the county staff saying, have you received any applications? That may be the only way to kind of keep on top of it.
Okay, Chris, try to stay on top of that, please.
That would be in the financing application, if you could get hold of that, because some developers do set aside a number of affordable units in the development because it makes the financing more attractive, or they can get some HUD financing.
That's what I was going to say. They get a grant somewhere is what they get.
So are there any other comments from the board? Okay, we'll
Nope.
go ahead and move forward to item B, which is the preliminary FY 2021 budget. And this is a precursor. We wanted to get into some line by line item details on the budget today to fine tune the budget for the meeting on the 21st, looking ahead to setting that top of mark budget for board consideration and approval on June 4th. And if I may, our preliminary budget could cause some concern. It's pushing more than 60% of an increase, looking at from about a $560 assessment last year to almost $1,000. I just want you to know up front that we put a number of high dollar items in the budget to indicate a need, and also set it as a discussion point with the board on those items. For example, we have $500,000 in there to replace one soccer field, which is really replacing the turf, the irrigation system, and the drainage, as a soccer field, like a golf course, fairly and green, after a amount of time needs to be replaced. And those fields are entering their useful life, the end of them, and they're going to have to be addressed because we won't be able to continue to maintain them without some large scale renovation.
Questions?
And I just want to tell you other items we have too, is like the first year of a 5-year plan to replace streetlights. We have huge increases in spending for repair and cleaning of the stormwater pipes, huge increases in littoral and pond maintenance, large scale expenditures for recreation facilities and paving meaning the trails on the side of the road, the sidewalks, and the roads and streets are under constant attack from those oak tree roots. And the county assumed ownership of Gateway Boulevard and Griffin. We still maintain those paths, sidewalks, and landscaping. Any damage to those facilities from the trees will be our responsibility to fix. So there's some big ticket items coming up, and we put those into the budget for discussion. Questions, Mr. Tinkle?
Yeah, I had two. They had a lot of A, B, C, and D afterwards, but two. Issue one, under special assessment levy, I was flabbergasted to see a number that shows FY 2020 projected $3,464,000. I'm looking at page 76. And then under FY 2021 budget, $6,382,000 for a variance of $2,009,000. Please explain that one to me.
Well, that's 4 or 5 of those $500,000 items I just mentioned.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say. This is just reflecting adding $2.8 million or $2.9 million worth of projected expenses.
Sure, and that 500,000 of that's for the soccer field. And that's
okay. I'm not going to get. It's too early to get into those debates. What I would like to see done, and I think I might get some support for the others. We are not going to solve our problems I can't believe I'm saying this. We aren't going to solve our problems overnight. I think what would be nice would be if you would come back and start the preparation of maybe a 5-year plan of solving each of these items such that we don't have to put $2.8 million on the table for 2021. Maybe we can put a percentage, and maybe we can even look at some innovative financing ways to even scatter these things out over 5, 10. Well, if we go over 5, Tony's going to hit me on that damn bond validation deal. But even if that's necessary, let's look at some innovative ways to solve, because I've looked at the stuff, notwithstanding the issue of the soccer field, everything you put in this budget, I don't have an absolute reason to object to it. It's needed. The question is it needed today, or is it needed over the next 5 years? That's all I got.
And that was really the intent of this. What I'd like to do is just start on the general fund 001 and look at some of those big dollar items that we inserted, and not things like tree trimming services, where we increased the budget from last year from $40,000 to $50,000, so $10,000, and that's really just additional trimming on these oaks around streetlights where we have issues. But as you see, we have Gateway Boulevard irrigation retrofit, 5-year plan, and we put $500,000 in that first year because we had an estimate last year for the consultant. And when he looked at rehabbing all of Gateway Boulevard and Griffin, he said $2 to $2.5 million. Of course, you have to select what your plants are going to be, or whether you're going to design the system to continue oak trees. But of course, our irrigation systems cobble together, and we do get continuous repair issues for it. But again, it's just bringing it to the forefront, looking at it. And we could start by doing 2 or 3 medians and designing them and getting a cost. And we'll say it's our irrigation system. And especially on the boulevards, the utility is the big customer. We do have a 15% set aside in our rate for repair and replacement. So that there is some funding source in there where we could start that effort, get the design work done, and see what the cost is per median, and then bring that to the board for approval. The design work would be minimal, probably $8,000 to $10,000 to come up with a standard, and then it would be the capital costs or renewal replacement cost. So right now, there's $500,000 of that 2.6 million. And that's where we came from.
Like I said, I think it can be split out.
And Chris, what's driving the landscape increase?
Well, the landscape increase is when we looked at total replacement of the irrigation system. Really what you're looking at is boring new irrigation lines, installing new heads, installing satellite controllers, just bringing it into modern times. And that's
not necessarily, that's not a mainscape. It could or could not be a mainscape issue, but that's just included in that that general fund GL, right?
Correct. And it's not something we have to do right now, but it's something we need to look at, because as the oak trees continue to have issues with all the lines, including the street light lines that they're corrupting, those irrigation lines will need to be replaced, the heads will need to be replaced, and the controllers will need to be replaced.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. I see the irrigation line item now with the 500K in there. Okay, sorry, I didn't catch that the first time around.
Doug, I think the ball is in our park as the board to first determine what we want to see as the vision for those two, Gateway Boulevard and Griffin Drive, as to what we want to see as the vision for what the planting or the landscaping plan is going to be. That's going to be done first before we go and say that we want to spend $500,000 on irrigation. That may very well be what we end up doing, but I don't want to go out there and spend a lot of money putting in an irrigation system that's designed to put in one type of plant. We put in another one that requires a third of the amount of water. In other words, a different piping design. So our
Well,
first is we've got to figure out what we want as our design before we spend a lot of money on irrigation piping, which gets back to what I talked to Chris about earlier, and that is the deal. This stuff has to be done over a 5-year and maybe even a 10-year plan.
If I may comment too, Mr. Tinkle, you're exactly right about the plant selection. And one thing we would do, for a lower cost effort is look at some of those original sections and the age of those oaks and have an arborist evaluate them, because the arborist might say in 5 years, those trees are going to fall over and die. So you're going to have to replace them anyway.
Totally agree.
If you're asking me, I look at low water use landscape and I would call it the Palmetto Parkway. And replace all the trees with palmettos, but we'd be happy to, again, bring back a scale back, looking at the plant selection, have the arborist look at 4 or 5 of those islands and spend about $25,000 with conceptual designs, cost figures, and that we could bid and bring some selection options back to the board. But we want to get started.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, when we did that initial kind of irrigation review, I think it was last year or year before that, I can't remember. Part of that was, hey, what we don't have is the landscaping plan. They didn't provide that. So, and I think that's important. So you build, what your plan is, and almost have your guidelines for that, or else you put in something that is going to be plant neutral, and your irrigation system is developed in a way where you can modify it, that staff or you can modify your irrigation with minimal cost. So I think there's kind of, when you're looking at it, what is the plan going to cost versus what modifications would be after the fact, and that's your cost benefit. So I think you just need to think through that.
I agree.
Yeah, and I think with some pricing we got for engineering, design, and water, and it really then gets the amount of heads and the size of pipes, but really have the arborists come in and have some plant selections available to put in there, and also the useful life of the oaks, because it may be time that you're going to have to look at taking those out, or they're done with their useful life. They start to fall over and they are impacting street lights also. But I think an effort like that could be accomplished for $20,000. So if it's okay with the board, I'll make a quick shift. We'll go from 480 to 20, do the conceptual plan for 3 or 4 medians and the arborist evaluation, and bring that back.
Kathy has a question.
Mrs. Flaherty, did you have a question?
I do. Can I go over some of the specifics in the budget and ask questions?
Oh, sure. I was just going down the line items there, but help yourself.
Okay, thank you. Lake maintenance has gone up $208,000.
What page, please?
Page 77.
That's under waterway management service.
Yep, it is.
And
$208,000 it's gone up. Could you explain to me why?
You want my answer?
Are you going to adjust that? You want me to fix it?
Kathy, what item, please?
It's on page 77 under water management services. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Some of us don't have that same page number.
12.
I've got different page.
Oh, it's
Okay.
under water management services, the 12th item.
Okay.
Does that help you any, Mr. Guy?
Yeah, it is. And then what's the title, please?
It's
Lake maintenance.
Lake maintenance. Okay. Thank you.
And we looked at increasing costs for the lake maintenance, one additional spraying around the rocks and additional spraying around, littorals. If the board decides they want to maintain the littorals according to the DO, which would require a lot of thinning in the community, we have kind of a bare bones project right now.
Okay, then why would we have littoral maintenance, littoral removal, littoral maintenance after removal of $100,000 littoral maintenance in excess of DO, $100,000. If that is in the lake maintenance budget. And that, Mr. Guy, is on the following.
I have it, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That's the following page. And
Yep.
I should have separated that because when we were looking at the pond standards and looked at littoral maintenance and littoral maintenance after removal and littoral maintenance in excess of DO, and there was $125,000 put in the budget this year. We had an estimate from Hampton Park just to bring those littorals into compliance with the DO widths of $70,000 for one community. However, on the lake maintenance side itself, we're really looking at other areas that have erosion or head wall issues or storm pipe issues.
Well, see, I think the littoral issue is part of the maintenance issue. Well, I don't understand why it's separated, because that's another $200,000.
And they both have to do with the shoreline, and a lot of it will be determined by the level of service the board sets when we do the pond standards.
Chris, are these estimates based upon staff's guesstimates, or are these based on talking to vendors and actually getting their estimates of the cost to do this?
Well, the existing contract with Aquagenics is approximately that $175,000 a year.
Okay.
And when we looked at additional services from them, the last time we bid the project out, the second bidder was at $320,000. And I think the board at that time asked him, why is the bid so high? And he said, that's what it's going to take to do the job correctly. And
So you just basically prorated it.
Right, and if you look at the costs that we pay Aquagenics for the extras that we end up adding onto it, which is, additional spraying, we might have to bring them in, or harvesting and all that, it pushes that up into other portions of the budget to about $250,000. So this is a champagne level of service like they probably have at Pelican Preserve versus our Bud Light service that we have. And that's the easiest way I can explain it. And where we're really going to have the rubber hit the road here is once these pond standards are done and we look at how much money we're going to need to, say, spray the weeds and do enhanced maintenance on the lakes, and also go around each year and have a few truckfuls of rock fill in some areas that might have washed away. We're going to put that out to bid, and we fully expect that bid to be closer to $250,000 to $300,000.
Thanks.
Did I hear that Pelican Preserve is the champagne standard?
I heard that same thing. I wonder what brand of champagne.
Well, we're just trying to emulate Mr. Geppert's budget.
Oh my God, I would never have done your ponds for 26 million. Please don't use my name in vain.
Ms. Flaherty, I know that you were not finished, so
I
please
am not
continue.
finished. Okay, $500,000 for the soccer field. I don't think that is really a necessity at this time. And I'm going to emphasize that there are many people who are unemployed presently in Gateway. We do not know what the situation is going to be. And I'm going to agree with Mr. Tinkle that we have to come back with another plan. So
that's what we're here today to do, and I'll be revising significantly downward that 500,000 for the irrigation to about 25,000 and bringing that back to the next meeting to see if it survives. And I'll take the lake maintenance down from that increase of 208,000 and probably bring it to 200,000, and then we'll see what we end up with in the bid. So. And that's why I'm going through this at the moment, to see what the board's feelings are and what we can take for an assessment and increase, and basically what's reasonable.
All right, I'm going to may I continue, Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Agenda page 80. Okay, the holiday event in December. I think we need to look for something else, not to get rid of it, but look for a way to lower that cost, and so that we can bring back the fishing tournament, because that is well attended. Because you took out the fishing tournament.
And that's fine, we can reestablish the fishing tournament.
But I think even if we have to bring in more, maybe employee volunteers or something, or look at another resource to put out for the holiday event, see if we can find something cheaper. Just a suggestion. It seems to be an expensive event, but I think we can do it at a lower price.
And well, I think we could too, and basically that's from the staff standpoint, the reason we did it is we were just gonna concentrate on one larger community event a year, and some of the smaller ones that we haven't had good turnout for, but taken an immense amount of time considering the amount of people that attend. Of course, we could do a better job of promoting them, but that was the logic behind it.
Okay, and my next question.
We can reduce the budget on the holiday event and bring back the $2,500 for the fishing tournament and movie night.
No, $1,000 for the fishing tournament. That's all it is. That's why if we could reduce the holiday event by a couple of thousand, we could do the fishing tournament.
We'll shuffle that around and bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. All right, now I'm going to agenda page 88. Staffing plan. That'll help.
What page you on?
Said 88.
Agenda page 88.
Mine aren't lining up with yours.
Okay, I don't know why. It's the fiscal year 2021 staffing plan.
I don't have that. Let's see.
Okay, I got that on 89.
Okay,
And yours.
Which one?
Yeah, keep going down all the way to the end of the budget. Okay, that's it. Agenda page, okay, we're at the staff.
mine is sideways. I don't know why, but mine is sideways. I don't have it like that in my book. I'm looking at, it says here, stormwater specialist. I don't know if you have that there. It's a new maintenance tech, and then we have the maintenance tech under the next category.
What are you looking at?
My paper looks like this.
Is yours the one that's on the screen, page 91?
No, mine does not look like that. I don't have that one.
What page you looking at?
My page is like this.
What's the title?
It says staffing plan.
That's what
Agenda
this
book
fiscal year
That's what the one that was in
2021
the book.
staffing. plan.
I am?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. It's the 2021 staffing plan.
Okay. But that okay, mine looks like, is not like that. It wasn't in my book like that. Okay, so I mean, there's two. It says stormwater specialist, but it says underneath their employee, a new maintenance tech. And then we have a maintenance tech under Parks and Rec. So are those two different?
We have one maintenance tech under Parks and Rec was a
Right,
position
there's
we
one
recently
here.
filled, and we never filled that stormwater specialist position. At the moment, Brian's of the opinion that he can handle the workload.
Now what? I'm going to go to the pool supervisor.
Okay,
Okay. Your hourly rate on this paper is what?
$18 an hour,
Okay. Last year in our budget, it was
14.
$12.80.
Last year in the budget was $12.80. All the pool staff was $15 an hour last year.
But that's still about a $550 increase, and that's like 20%. However, we did have a person who was full-time, and you made them part-time, and they had to leave because they needed the benefits. If we hire somebody again full-time, okay, my question is this person going to be sent down again to be part-time and then lose their benefits?
No, we changed the pool attendants due to the hours to part-time on their hours. And what we have now is we brought that salary for the pool supervisor up to a range where we could hire somebody competent in the area that had the skill set that we needed to run a facility like that. And we have a person that's going to start in 2 weeks. It's actually a pool manager over at Sunsplash that has pool certifications and the background in chemistry and also customer service to run that facility. And that was what the salary in these areas to have a pool manager was, in that $18 an hour range.
Okay, because we did have a full-time person at the pool, and they went to part-time, and they lost their benefits, okay? And then they had to quit because they needed benefits. What I'm worried about is if you're going to do the same thing to this person who's full-time, when you have to shorten hours, and make them part-time, and then they'll lose their benefits. That's my question.
We're not planning on doing it. We're planning on having a full-time pool supervisor there, as we had before, and the hours were reduced, and that person didn't lose their benefits. They were reclassified to a part-time position.
The other question I have is on the intern.
Their performance
is on the intern. I thought the intern comes from a college. So is this intern that we have now going to leave and we're getting another intern?
Actually, what we're looking at right now is trying to find a way. He's finishing up his master's degree and been a big help to utilities and public works, and also the development of our GIS system. And we're trying to find a way to move some money around to bring him on full-time or increase his hours, because we have several projects related to the GIS, related to stormwater, and also some EPA requirements for reliability and emergency response plan that we don't have adequate staffing to address. So we'll actually be coming back at the next meeting. Of course, that'll be coming from the enterprise fund to make that position full-time.
But I thought we hired a company to finish the GIS.
We have a company that's doing all the scanning and putting the technical data together for us, but operating and updating and maintaining that data. And it's something we really need for the field staff and to bring our information handling into current times.
I have to tell you, Chris, your voice kind of goes low and I can't hear you. And that's why when you're talking, I might start to talk, because all of a sudden you can't hear you.
Okay, sorry, is that better?
That's much better. Thank you. Because you kind of.
I'll expand on that a little bit, because the GIS system, I think the district expended almost $90,000 over a 4-year period before I got here with no tangible results. And we found a very cost-effective way and did the contract in the budget this year to have our complete map set scanned into a digital format. And that'll all be done in the next 4 months. And then we'll make sure that information's available to field staff, on their laptops, so they can pull that information in and out. And also when they're out in the field getting that information, we want somebody in here to be able to update it. And that includes the stormwater system, so that when we go out and make these pipe repairs, we can add that to the database and also turn it into an asset management system, which is inputting all that data, projecting its useful life and when it needs to be repaired, replaced, and what the cost is going to be.
Chris, can you go through that staffing plan and indicate which one of those positions are currently open?
The positions that we have open, and Mr. Geppert, I'll get to you in a moment. The position that we have open is at the very top under administration. We have the business manager position open. We have the administrative assistant position open. We have the stormwater specialist position that's open, but at the present time, we have no intent to fill that position.
Okay.
We have one pool attendant position that's open, and if we continue with our 90-hour week during the summertime, we'll have to fill that position also, because a part-time employee is now up to 25 hours a week, not 30 as it used to be. So if any of those people work over 25 hours a week, we have to provide them with the full-time benefit package.
Okay, going on.
And then we have one more, which is a field operator in the utility department that's open.
Which one?
It's just a vacant position.
For which rate of pay, 18?
Oh, at the 18.
I'm sorry?
It's at the 18.50 per hour. And it's
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay,
starting level position.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Madam Chairman?
I wanted to make sure Mrs. Flaherty had asked all of her questions. Bill, and then you're next.
No, I had one more. Sorry. I'm going back to the intern. If he's a student at a school, how can he work full-time?
He's recently graduated his master's degree in environmental education. He's environmental engineering, excuse me. When he started with us, he was still part-time, and he also works part-time at Publix to get the insurance benefits.
All right. Thank you. Now you answer. Now I'm finished.
William.
So you're
Hey,
finished,
can I-
Mrs. Flaherty?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for your patience.
Mr. Gepper, you had a
Mr.
comment?
Scott?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
Me or
Thank you,
Chris?
ma'am. What are we-
Bill,
what are we-
can I ask a question before we leave that?
Sure.
Okay, on the GIS that you're doing internally with your intern, would it be a fair statement to say that you're modeling your data points off of what we developed at Pelican?
Well, very similar. We're putting in our water, wastewater, irrigation, and stormwater facilities. And when I
Okay,
made
great.
a comment about asset management, we hope to do the same thing you are, where you can put in there when the pipe was fixed, when the pipe's going to be cleaned, when it was cleaned last.
Well, the only reason I even brought it up, and it's, because when we started with GIS, it was a blank page.
Right.
And we didn't know what we wanted, but over the last 5-6 years, we developed a pretty good and robust model. And I totally support what you're doing over there. And as a matter of fact, you're doing it great with the intern. But I wouldn't want to leave the impression that we collectively, all of Gateway, hasn't gotten something from the money that the collectively has invested with Passarella or GIS. And my only point being, it's been a lot easier for you guys to replicate what we built, correct?
Certainly, and I was looking at some of the past efforts where they were just putting subdivision maps and different maps together that really weren't useful for building blocks or development. The work that you've done with Passarella is a totally different effort.
Okay, that's all. I mean, I know I heard some that the district spent 90,000 with them on other efforts versus, what we've done with ponds over here. That's all. It's just, I want to give the team that built it over here the right credit for it. That's all.
Great job. As a matter of fact, we look at that and emulate, look forward to making something user friendly for our residents. The only issue we have is with some of our utility lines and that it's not allowed to be public record due to Homeland Security concerns. But on the stormwater side, when you look at having all that information in there, it's a huge benefit to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Guy?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I believe that this board has made some great headway the last few years on some very important items. They've done it with some reasonable increases in the residents' assessments. Now, our residents may be in their most difficult financial position since 2008, the Great Recession, maybe worse. Now is not the time to put in big increases on our residents unless they are absolutely needed. I don't want to be in the position of having to vote against a budget. I've never done that, and I don't want to start now. But we have got to have some understanding of reality and where our residents are. Thank you very much.
And
Anything else, Mr. Guy?
No, ma'am, that's it.
if you'd like, I'll continue just to move down to 01 and really, because I think it gathers some good decision and good points for the board to consider. You know, the majority of these items we have minor increases in and some of them decreases in.
Go right ahead, Chris.
Okay. But we were stuck when we finished there and went with Miss Flaherty, and she was talking about the lake maintenance, and I said we go ahead and reduce that. And where you see some of the next big items is we have stormwater system pipe and catch basin repair, which we call a new item at $250,000, and also stormwater catch basin and valley gutter repair on the streets, which are new items. And those items, we could use the existing items in the budget, which was the $250,000 for storm drain cleaning and $150,000 for bathymetrics that were in the budget last year at $400,000. And we've been using that for conveyance repair and cleaning. But we could address those two items without a budget increase by making use of those amounts, and $250,000 for the repair, valley gutter repair, and at that other $400,000 level, that would still leave us $100,000 for storm drain cleaning without an increase in the budget. And that would be the track we would take to hold the line. The littoral, the big items that following that, the littoral maintenance after removal and littoral maintenance in excess of the DO, pond bank standards will drive that. But again, it's an expensive undertaking to start trimming those littorals back and maintaining them according to the DO. And I know there was some consternation over in Hampton Park when we had that section of littorals removed. But one of the reasons we did that was to see what the maintenance cost was when you remove the littorals. And we've had to go back in there and actually spray and remove exotics that took over when those littorals left. So when you do a projection on littoral maintenance, you also have to make a projection if the board goes ahead with those pond standards and removes littorals, there will be a cost to maintain a clean shoreline. But again, those items can be removed from the budget, but it's going to be real tough to maintain the littorals without additional money with that existing contract with Aquagenics, because I think the cost is going to go up as we realize by that quote for $70,000 from Aquagenics.
Madam Chairman.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, just on this item, you know, I think a couple things are happening. I mean, one, we're revising the pond standard. I think we're finally trying to address pond maintenance, littoral maintenance, all those different things, which does incur costs. I think we would have absorbed, you know, Hampton Park Lakes and some other things. So, you know, our scope in lake management continues to increase. I think under the current conditions, we are going to have to make some very difficult decisions in the upcoming months around what is priority, where we need to be spending money, and where we need to cut back. When it looks, you know, as much forward progress as we've made within the lakes and all that kind of stuff, I hate for us to take a step back. But however, I think this might be an opportunity for us to maybe try to partner with some of the HOAs, those that have, you know, lakes that might require some additional maintenance, and see if there is a potential appetite to do some shared costs. If there is, you know, a certain standard, you know, that is defined and that we want to try to regulate. So again, I don't know how we go about doing that, or if there's any appetite, but I think I don't know if it's a long-term approach or if it's just short-term, but I don't think that we're going to get this board to approve some of these expenditures around lake maintenance and littorals and all that kind of stuff compared to, some of the other things that we may need. So if an HOA or a community wants, is looking for a certain standard, and we would normally have to, be able to operate under that, but we may need some assistance in order to maintain a standard that might be expected.
And I will say, we broached that with a couple of communities and talked about level of service, and they've indicated that they would cooperate and absorb part of that payment. And also why we added 2 items at $100,000 each for an increase in $200,000. We didn't include that $125,000 that was put in for this year's budget, which is littoral maintenance in excess of DO. So we could keep with the existing budget expenditure and of course remove those 2 $100,000 items and keep the line item the same without an increase there also.
Margaret, comment?
Go ahead.
If everybody would go to page 92, or at least it's 92 on mine, which is the assessment chart for 2021, and it does show current methodology, so we don't want to get confused by that versus what we're proposing. But it's real interesting to see that now with what Chris and staff have done by identifying costs that we need to do to bring our stormwater management system up to what I'm going to call a standard. And I'm going to call the standard Pelican Preserve, because they've done one hell of a job of doing their stormwater management system. I find it amazing that the numbers are similar. Amazing that the numbers are similar. I think what it boils down to is we're paying the piper for stuff we have kicked down the road for years, and we're now starting to get equality. Pelican Preserve has 40 ponds. We basically are double everything they have. And that even works on the EAUs. They have 3,000, we have 6,000, or whatever the number is. I find it amazing that our numbers for our assessments are now really closing in with this massive amount of money spent, are closing in for parity with Pelican Preserve. Unbelievable. Over all these years, we are now achieving parity. And I think it's showing that the reason it takes to do that is we haven't been spending the money like Pelican has over the last 5 years under their pond group, who was way ahead of us on thinking. Now, I agree with what Bill's saying. This certainly isn't the time to be trying to get parity on the backs of everybody in 1 year. That's why I'd like to see going back and taking this entire budget. And I think Chris and the guys did one hell of a job of putting this stuff together. I think now what we have to do is somehow put it in perspective of time and maybe doing it and scheduling it over a 5-year. We're not going to solve all of our problems in 1 year. I've given up on that. There's not enough money. Let's look at trying to take some of these things that we're trying to do to get that and keep that parity, and let's do it over a 5-year period and do this step by step.
Mr. Banks, had you finished?
Hey, I'm done.
Okay. Mr. Tinkle, are you finished?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to kind of piggyback on a couple of the things that other supervisors have said, because looking at $500,000 to do one soccer field gives me heartburn. I think we need to come up with plan B, C, and D. as to what we really want to do with those fields. So I, at this time, I would like to see that set aside or taken out of this budget. I don't see how we could possibly do that. I realize that if we want to keep those soccer fields, this is something we're really going to have to seriously consider, but maybe keeping those soccer fields is something we really need to consider. There's a couple other things here that I don't have any problem with, some of the things that, like the littoral maintenance after removal, you know, if it's trimming back. It's the littoral maintenance in excess of the DOs, or when we're trimming back. We really have to have money in the budget to do that, because it's not just Hampton Parks lakes, but the littorals are growing out into the centers of the lakes and other lakes too. So we're going to have to maintain those. We just need to wrap our arms around that. And roadway maintenance and repairs, I was glad to see that extra money had been put in for that. And I hate to say it, but we've got a lot of repair work out there on those roads now. No, it's just that the county has not come to us and said, you better get this fixed, but they're going to.
The key word is yet. Yet.
It's gonna happen. It's coming.
Gonna happen. Yep.
Down the road. And I do agree with you, Ed, that I don't want to see these ideas disappear. I'd like to see them as they're removed from this budget on a separate sheet of paper so that we can take a second look at them. Because we're doing more than one pass on this budget to see what we want to do with it. So Chris, I would like to see the things that we've talked about removing or reducing today on a separate sheet, saying this line item was reduced, this one was increased, this one was reduced, so that we can take a second look at those things, please.
Yeah, we will do that from a staff perspective. In the big picture, I told you there's some items we have existing that can cover what's a priority need with the stormwater system and the maintenance and repair, which is a big deal. The second big deal, of course, is the roadway services and the street lighting services. And we'll look at keeping existing expenditures on the budget, but I did want to say that I'm working right now looking at the framework. And Tony and I have been having discussions about charging our utility a franchise fee to operate within the district, because we use the rights of way. And it's very common for municipalities that have utility operations that charge the utilities a franchise fee and use that revenue. And I'm really talking about $350,000 that would be pulled from our rates and maybe some from our reserves as a revenue stream to make these efforts in the roadway and the sidewalk repair, those things that could be a liability to us for accidents and lawsuits, and keep that work moving forward without an increase in the budget. So,
obviously, stormwater repair and maintenance, we have to do that. I think Irma proved to all of us how important that is. We can't let that go on to the back burner. That has to continue marching forward.
Margaret, question?
Go ahead.
Chris is kind of between a rock and a hard spot. He's gone out and staff has put this thing together, and I think they've done a hell of a job. Would it be a good idea that maybe each one of us separately meet with Chris, give him our ideas so that he can blend these things and have a better idea of what each of us individually think, to try to come up with some ideas for what version 2 looks like?
Well, there should be, there should be the CIP plan that we used last year, that had a multi-year plan on it. Those components in year 2 should be incorporated here when we go back and review it. So you're going to throw it in the budget, and I understand that you want to start with, hey, this is our wish list, and when you start to cut it back. But there should also be another basically tracking list that says, hey, out of these 10 items that are on the budget is capital improvement or whatever, what is their priority? When do we need, when do we need to get these done? So if we're not going to do them now, we earmark them for next year. And so next year we go back and say, hey, these items were earmarked for this year from last year. We go through the prioritization and review process again. So I think that's what we're all asking for. But I thought this was already kind of done.
Well, while everybody was talking, I sit there and went through and added up, and I by no means came up with everything, but I came up with about $2.8 million of items here that, in my opinion, could be scattered over time. If each one of us would go through those items and pick a number, 20,000, 10,000 and greater, pick a number, and do the same thing of scattering those over a period of time to give to Chris as what you envision as the priority. I think that would give him some guidance to come back to us with a plan that would be a multiple year plan and not try to spend. And I don't think that was his intent at all. I think his intent was to tell each of us what we need to know, not what we want to know, what we need to know. And I think he did his job. He told us what we need to know. 2.8 million is what we need to spend. Now the question is when.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I agree with your point on that, Ed. I think that's very well taken. And I think, we don't want to keep being behind. We want to continue marching forward, catching up on things so that we're being proactive, not reactive, which is what our goals have been all along. And some of these things are going to be hard decisions, but like the irrigation on Gateway Boulevard, we can't do that project all in 1 year anyway. You couldn't, it's impossible. So.
And also, besides the enterprise assessment, or that franchise fee, as I call it, we're also looking at stormwater utility, where we take that large expenditure for the waterway services and break that into bi-monthly payments on our utility bill for the residents. So they'd still be paying that portion of the assessment, but it wouldn't be in one big chunk. When it's time to pay the assessment, it would be spread out over the year in the utility bill. And that's another thing we're looking at, because you might be paying it bi-monthly, but you've taken it out of the big chunk of the assessment. That may make that burden a little easier to swallow. And again, without any huge net increase. So those are two things we're looking at to try to hold the line on the budget.
Absolutely. I like
my whole idea was just that I think Chris needs to hear from each one of us separately our ideas on each of these, then he can blend them and come back with whatever proposal he has. But somehow, some way, I think we all agree that there's no way in hell 2.8 million is going to be added to this budget this year. Not going to happen. Now, notwithstanding the 500,000 for the soccer, which is a totally separate issue, this stuff can be done over time, and I think he needs some guidance as to what that time is, and it needs to be some type of a capital reserve plan that says we're going to do this over 5 years, which means if it's 500,000, we go 100. Something to be able to help him get this number down to a manageable number. But back to the deal with that soccer, I'll tell you, we got a problem. We got a major problem. The same thing we've ran here at the golf course here at Gateway. That grass doesn't last forever.
Right.
Beating that grass to death over there. We've got a problem. We got to figure out how we solve that issue on that soccer. And it is not going to be an easy problem because it's not cheap. You cannot sit there and do all those activities on grass, just like on the golf course. The country club here is looking at probably a $3, $4, $5 million project to change the grass. And we're going to do the same thing on the soccer. The question is, how do we do it? And you're looking at big bucks. It's just unfortunate, but it's big bucks down here in Florida.
I'll just ask, does anybody else have any other comments on the budget?
Margaret, I'm sorry.
If I can for a I came over earlier this week and met with Brian Bashir, and we went over how the things had been accomplished in Pelican, and they're not done by a long shot, but we got a vision. But most of our projects have been 5-year projects, whether it's aeration or fish installation or sewer cleaning or aquagenics, doing things with our ponds and littorals. But we didn't do everything in 1 year by a long stretch. And we've had a vacillating pond of money, or pack of money that we've been chiseling away. That's why it varies each year what we spend. So I'll just throw that out. I agree with everything that Ed said. All these things need to be done, but you got to do it when you can afford it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
And Margaret,
Anyone else? Anyone else have any comments?
Margaret, if I may,
Go ahead, Tony.
just briefly, if the board wants Chris to meet with the board members one-on-one and have Chris hear their priorities and their concerns separately, and I know we all know the drill, that Chris can't tell other board members what the prior board member said, just so we have all those discussions out in public as opposed to having it sort of daisy chained. But I mean, Chris can get the input and the priorities in the separate conferences. I think that's a good idea, but as long as it's not daisy chaining. That's all.
Thank you, Tony.
And Madam Chair, if I may make one last comment from a staff
Sure.
standpoint, we'll get to work. We'll leave all these items in the budget as placeholders and put them into 5-year plans and seed efforts. And we'll be back with to minimize the burden as best we can on the residents. And the bottom line is that 2.8 million, all I want is like money for 1 or 2 lakes.
All you want is what?
Was the money it costs to rebuild 1 or 2 lakes.
Yeah. With that, Chris, let's move on to consent agenda. Since that's our last item for A, B, C, and D.
Any comments or changes to the consent?
Move
Motion
approval of the
approved.
consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. To get a vote, we'll start with Ms. Flaherty.
Yes,
Okay, Mr. Guy,
Yes.
Mr. Banks,
Yes.
Mr. Tinkle,
Yes.
Ms. Feinberg.
Yes.
Okay, the consent agenda is passed. Is that all we have for today? Okay. Well, that concludes the agenda for today, and we'll be bringing back the budget and bringing back a staffing plan, some alignments that I've been working with Supervisor Banks on for the next meeting on the 21st, and hopefully make similar progress.
Thank you. Don't forget supervisor comments.
Okay. We'll start in the same order. Comments, Supervisor Flaherty.
the only question I have is our next meeting. Because we're supposed to have a public hearing. Are there any chances it's going to be in Gateway, or are we going to have to change that?
Well, we're looking at public venues that are larger than this one, but we did put it on the agenda so that that assessment methodology public hearing could be extended to June 4th, which we hope by that time we can have public gatherings, or we're going to have to find a larger venue with social distancing.
Okay, that was all my concern. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Guy, comments?
I have nothing more.
Okay. Mr. Banks?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tinkle, anything else?
Yeah, a couple of things. Do we have to not wait for the governor to do the phase 2 before we can take and meet as a group, or can we elect to meet, let's say, out in the garage of the maintenance building, set 6 feet? I just think this public hearing, doing it this way, is not really fair to the residents.
I think we need to wait to see what the governor does, because And that's what concern we've expressed and the board has expressed before. The nature of this particular assessment methodology, we're radically changing the approach, is one that could generate a lot of public interest, and court cases and attorney general's opinions have opined that if you expect a large crowd for a topic and you have a facility that can't handle it, that may not be an appropriate, valid public hearing. And along the same lines, if you have a virtual public hearing on this revised methodology assessment methodology, it could provide an opportunity and a hook for someone who wants to challenge it later on. So hopefully we will be in a position to have a real in-person meeting, but I'm not sure I mean, that's only 2 weeks away. It's not in, and my crystal ball is in the shop getting repaired. So I couldn't tell you what's going to happen between now and then.
Well, I can tell you one thing, but I'm around this community a lot, and I can tell you right now, if you went out and you polled 100 people about the assessment methodology changes that we're talking about, 99 had no clue what the hell you're talking about. So that's
correct.
So I would like to have that as an open meeting. Tony, my other two questions are both for you. I was a little surprised and a little shocked that we saw a letter come through. Have we received a comment letter from the Attorney General's office asking for more information and clarification on the Stony Brook issue?
I received a letter from the Attorney General's office, and they have the requirement now for that certification, which you saw, to be signed by Margaret and myself, as to the nature of the issue. And
Can
also,
we all see a copy of the letter that came from March 5th from the Attorney General?
Sure. And the letter said initially, it said you have until 30 days or it's going to be deemed withdrawn. Then I had a telephone, as I mentioned, I had a telephone conversation with the Assistant Attorney General, which was very helpful in my formulating the additional materials to provide greater context for the request.
Well, my problem is that I saw we made the submission on about February 12th. And I've been talking to Chris, not daily, obviously, but quite frequently. Have we heard anything? Have we heard anything? Have we heard anything? Nothing. And now all of a sudden I hear that we did hear something on March 5th, and I was not made aware of that. I'd like to see what they sent us on March 5th.
Sure. And again, I will send that to you. And I think I'd mentioned at the last board meeting, I had received correspondence. I believe I'd mentioned that, but I'll provide a copy.
I'd like to get this issue resolved. And then the other one, Tony, I've been trying to make contact with Lennar and with Greg Roughgarden. I've got a real concern, and I think we have an opportunity to address this issue of that land north of Gateway Boulevard on the FPL that is not included in this current deal that we're dealing with WCI and with Chris Shields, or not Chris Shields, but with Pavis on the transfer. I'm talking about the land to the north of that, which would be inclusive of the land that would allow and keep open, because I think it's valuable to Gateway.
Which piece is that?
It's the FPL easement north of Gateway Boulevard to the old landfill.
Okay.
Which is inclusive of the road that is currently the construction entrance. I would not want to see Lennar do something with that land that would not be in either the interest of Gateway and or Pelican Preserve on dumping that off to somebody.
I guess, how big is that? Is that it's a developable piece?
It's 660 feet wide, and it's probably 600-700 feet long. It's a trapezoidal piece of property, which includes at the very north end that road that connects Gateway Boulevard to Pelican Preserve.
What I will do is, for the next board meeting, perhaps I can just have the board consider a letter to go under the chairman's signature to WCI, asking.
I don't think is it WCI or is it Lennar? I think it's Lennar.
Well, I call them one and the same, but Lennar, and ask them if they have consideration of conveying that to the district. But and the district, what would be the district's intended use? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't care about any of it except for that far north end where the road's at. But I think it would be advantageous to our community to have control over that property, since it basically connects both portions of Gateway, i.e. the Gateway side and the Pelican Reserve side. It would be crazy for us. What are they going to use it for? They can't do anything with it. It would be most advantageous for us to own it. And the guy that appears to be the one that I have to talk to, and I've not had any luck talking to him, is a guy named Greg Roughgarden. He is Dave Caldwell's heir apparent. And Dave said to say hi to everybody. Dave's alive and well up in Ocala.
Oh, no kidding. Well, how about Barry Ernst? Is Barry no longer involved in WCI Land matter?
That name hadn't come up.
I'll be darned. Okay.
I don't know that. I think it's Greg Roughgarden, but if you could check on that, because keeping that property free such that if there was a need for an emergency road or a connector, it sure would give us some options that if that goes to some other person or group, our flexibility disappears.
Okay. I'll do some background checking on it, and I will. I'll call Barry and see who's really handling all the matters. I mean, other than the Greg individual you mentioned. I'll find out. I'll call Barry.
That's all I had.
Yes, sir.
Hey, hey, Tony,
And-
just getting back to that, the AG letter, that was just
Yes,
a
sir.
request for additional information, right? There wasn't any decision or any input bearing our request, right?
No, it was one that I need to provide greater detail in my opinion, and well as providing the certification that they now require.
Where are all these attachments?
Minutes of board meetings that reference, it's a discussion as to board's discussions on the towing policy, the parking policy. It's the April letter of 2010 to the chairman about ownership of the roads. It's my April 2017 memo about parking and towing. It's the recent issues about towing, the recent resolutions.
Okay.
That's. I will send that to the board tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You're on, Margaret.
Okay, the only concern that I have is this public hearing. I don't think this is the kind of hearing that we should try and do virtually. And it doesn't sound like we are going to have a venue that's going to be willing to let us use their facility on the 21st. But it's possible, depending upon what happens with the state and the governor, that if we open this public hearing on the 21st and continue it to June 4th, that we will be able to have a venue and we will be able to meet in person. That's my hope. That's my comment. Anyone else have anything they want to say? Oh, I will call this meeting adjourned, and it is 6:23. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.